Hey everyone, how's everyone doing today? Welcome to the 8th annual Micro Four Thirds Meetup for 2026. This is part 2, where we've put together a group of professional photographers and enthusiasts for the Micro Four Thirds systems. And we're going to kind of tap into their brain and pick their brains a little bit about Micro Four Thirds in general and their experience with it. And I'll also give you some tips on how to use the Micro Four Thirds system. And I'm very proud and honored to have some very elite guests with me today. OM System Ambassador Lee Hoy, and he's done a great job sharing his technical skill and knowledge in particularly wildlife photography, and does workshops and mentoring and things like that. But if you guys have ever seen Lee, or and I have links to his channel down below. He's very to the point and no BS, right? So he's been a great asset to the Micro Four Thirds community, and I'm very, very happy to bring him on today. So let me hopefully, and let me know in the comments section if the audio and video is good, if you guys are hearing any echoes or anything, and maybe we can resolve that during the stream. But the most important thing is that you can hear us all. And Lee, how are you, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Rob. It's great to be back, man. I always enjoy being on your channel. I always have a good time. So yes, I have brought my no BS approach, although a few of my clients have told me I've been a lot nicer on YouTube lately since Easyana came into my life. So I don't know. Maybe I'm getting softer in my old age.
Yeah. A little more tempered, but that's fine. I mean, your core personality and who you are never changes, right?
No.
Always be straight and give people the straight shot, right?
That's right, man. Being from West Texas, I don't have time to be soft about it. No.
Right. Okay, awesome. So I look forward to getting into some wildlife photography with you. But let me go ahead and bring in Chris McGinnis. And Chris, how you doing, Chris?
Chris is also
OM System Ambassador, and is really known, I guess, for your macro photography, and has an amazing Instagram account with some super fabulous images, which hopefully you'll be able to share with us some of your favorite ones today. And I want to try to tap into your experience and give us some tips for macro photography, because I think OM Systems is one of the, if not the best, macro photography system to have, amongst all the camera brands, regardless of size and weight, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because you don't have a huge social media presence other than your Instagram account. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you can do for us today.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, like you mentioned, Rob, I mainly focus on macro photography. That's been, my main genre that I focus on for the past probably 8 or 10 years. And I've been shooting Olympus OM system for almost 20 now. So I started working for Olympus in early 2007. So I hit 19 years this week with Olympus. And then we all know that Olympus spun off OM system, and OM system became its own brand a few years ago. But I remained shooting with OM system and love it. And like Rob was kind of alluding to, I think there are a lot of advantages to shooting OM system, shooting Micro Four Thirds camera for macro. And I'm sure we'll dig into the reasons why I think that here. But yeah, anything small and alive is kind of what I aim my camera at, and try to really showcase those details and the things that maybe people typically overlook or never get to see, and showcase those things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like a whole different world down at the macro level. Another alien planet down there.
Absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah, and some would argue insects are from another world. But okay, awesome. So also I have with me today Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy, which was a pretty ambitious name for a channel. Very committed, right?
Yeah, maybe it was a mistake in the first place. It's one of those things you can't easily pedal backwards out of. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the moniker now. It's good.
But Brian, I think you're a little bit of a mystery, I think, even though you have talked about briefly on your channel about what your background is, where you came from, because you seem to be a little bit more private in that sense. But share with us what you can, a little bit about yourself. And I know a lot of people here know you from your YouTube channel, but you can tell us. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been in photography since I was 6 years old. But a lot of the photography I've done professionally has been things like portrait photography, especially schools and high volume stuff. Or I've been doing shoots for clients or commercials, all sorts of things, from tiny little micro components for printed circuit boards all the way up to great big things which fit inside aircraft hangars.
Wow.
I've also done a bit of press photography in the past. The trouble is, all of those sort of things are client shoots. I do very little for myself. And although I'm a technical photographer, I'm a techie. I came from a technical background, electronics background. I'm not a super creative. So I always feel maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome when you get some people who are really creative photographers. But I've got the skill set to be able to work out how to do the photographs.
Right.
Which means that generally I don't tend to like sharing too much online. I'm quite private on that, but I like to try and give people a feeling about how a camera works, and I educate people if I can. And I find an awful lot of the education skips the basics. So you've got a huge amount of photographers out there who see a lot of people on YouTube, unfortunately, and think that, you know, they've got to go straight in the middle and they don't know the basics. So a lot of my fun now, my fascination, especially now I've retired and I don't do it as a business anymore, is getting back to basics and working out what really constitutes a photograph rather than what technology constitutes the photograph, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the great things about, you know, the Micro Four Thirds system is, you know, you do have full control over the basics, right? And and the fact that it's so compact and portable, you know, because you don't really need, you know, huge medium format or giant cameras to capture a great image. Micro
No,
Four
and I
Thirds.
found that I've moved from the UK to Cyprus in the Mediterranean recently, and that's had two effects. It's taken my mind off photography. I've had something really important to think of other than taking photographs. So that's the first thing. And the second thing was looking at what I actually need to bring with me. I still have my house in the UK. My son lives in my house, and I still have a lot of my gear there. So I've come across here having to be very savvy what I brought and why I brought it, but still wanting to take photographs. But at the same time, working out that my motivation is still there because everything else in life is going on around me. And I found my motivation for pure photography was tested. And I've been trying to find ways to get back into to ignite that enthusiasm that I used to have.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and all of us have faced that, you know, over the years, I think, that have been shooting a long time. You'll get back there because ultimately that is one of your passions and has been for a long time. And, you know, maybe, and that reminds me, I'm sorry that I originally had Dax and Ali O'Keefe scheduled. And Ali would have been a great person to ask about getting over that hump, right? But hopefully I can have them back on maybe next month in a separate stream. But life happens.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to explain how I've managed to get over it, because I think I have cracked the nut. I think I have managed to get over it.
Awesome.
So hopefully during the case of this podcast, we'll be able to I'll be able to tell you where my mind is going.
Awesome. Awesome. I look forward to that. So, you know, I wanted to sort of ask the group in general, you know, particularly Lee and you, Brian, about, you know, sort of this, the transition that you had from other systems. I think you both shot Canon, you know.
Yeah.
And what was the, say, in a habit or workflow that may have changed when you're transitioning from Micro Four Thirds? Because there's, you know, I've noticed in the field there's so many Micro Four Thirds shooters, you know, out in wildlife doing, you know, wildlife and macro. Now I'll start with you, Lee. What would you say is a habit or workflow that needs to change when you go to Micro Four Thirds?
You got to quit worrying about the stupid camera meter. We don't even need it in the camera anymore. It's a waste. The live highlight alert feature, which I believe if it's, I mean, it's up there with AI subject detection as the top 2 features in the camera. But a couple of key settings under metering during sequential, you need to make sure that's set to yes, so that when you're using SH2, which is 50 frames per second, your live highlight alerts will be updated between each shot. I will tell you that the biggest issues I run into so many people who are now with Micro Four Thirds, and I say, and I'm going to teach them how simple exposure is. I mean, it does not take much experience with OM system cameras where you should be nailing your exposure to the right every single time. Wildlife, birds in flight, pro capture, landscape, of course, night sky, macro with flash, you know, we're not relying on our live highlights. So yes, there are a couple of genres in particular that we go back to other modes for our exposure. Okay. And so we still have our post capture highlight alerts that help us a lot. But I would say the biggest shift, you know, you can get rid of all the stupid rules that we had to learn shooting DSLR like a white bird against a dark background with the, you know, with front lighting was minus a third of a stop, right? All those silly, stupid rules, or a hawk up in the sky on a cloudy day is 2 1/3 stops and, you know, overexposure. All that crap you had to learn, it's superfluous. And you no longer have to guess about exposure. So the technical side, which I know Brian said earlier in his introduction, I love the technical side, but I don't get tingly over it like you do the creative side, because the technical side isn't what shows up on your screen that makes you go, ooh, it's the creative side, right? It's composition, it's light. But photographing backlit birds in crazy lighting conditions, never been easier, right? So we know that transition, I think is one of the biggest challenges. And then there's the lie from a lot of, I mean, y'all know me, I'm honest. Simone Dietremont, he's probably never touched an OM system camera, and he says you can't shoot at high ISO. Well, how the hell would you know? You've never touched one. I shoot at ISO 25,600. I crop it. I can put it on the cover of a magazine. So I get frustrated with professionals who don't know crap about our system, but love to talk about it. They've never put their hands on it, so they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I've never driven a Ferrari, so if I were to try to talk to you about how to race a Ferrari, it'd just be pure crap, right? So I think it's important that for a lot of those folks that watch this now live or later, quit worrying about your ISO. That is a T-Rex. That's extinct. You've got DxO Pure Raw. Yes, I've tested them all. I do a post-processing mentorship. I've tested them all. It performs the best time and time again. In fact, Model 2, I still like better than the new Model 3. Sorry, DxO, I like Model 2 better. But
I agree.
You've got to make the transition on your exposure. And guys, I'll apologize. I don't know why I can't do a chat. Some of y'all have sent me comments, and I would love to respond with my typical sarcasm and wit, but it won't let me send y'all messages. But good morning and hi. I would say, so I was shooting Canon and Sony and OM system at the same time. And I'm probably going to hurt some Sony feelings. I said this earlier during our earlier talk. If you love cleaning sensors, Sony is a great camera. I hate cleaning sensors. I like taking pictures, and it has almost no special features. Canon, I saw it was falling way behind in the mirrorless world, and I wanted to get something out of that big 600mm lens before it wasn't worth anything. And that's one of the reasons I made the shift. And then the close focus. You have to change your mind on what you can shoot. I'll say this last, and I'm gonna let Brian share because I don't know him, so I'm interested in his take too. I crop probably less than 1% of all my wildlife images, and because we don't need to, and that's a different mindset I think that you can take. I'm not saying you shouldn't or don't. I'm just saying for me, the joy is capturing it in camera with subject detection, light gear. And you guys know I love bird and flight. It's never been easier. So yeah. I think those are some of the big things in the transition world, at least from a wildlife and some landscape macro. I do landscape macro night sky, but yes. But I see people in the field still, they buy OM system and they're still shooting as if they're holding a Canon or a Nikon in their hand, and you cannot do that. You can't do that.
Yeah, and that's interesting about not using. So let me try and ask you from a more practical standpoint. When you say we don't need to worry about exposure,
you don't need to worry about the camera meter.
The camera meter, okay.
But exposure you need to worry about. But you got live highlight alerts, so it's so easy. I will tell you. You got a question coming up later, and I will tell you a setting that I started using that radically transformed my exposure.
Awesome.
Even before it's never made it easier. I'll just go ahead and share it with y'all. Here you go, and I'll explain it more later. You know how if you press the ISO button, you lose live highlight alerts? That's aggravating. Well, guess what? If you move ISO to the front dial, you not only get live highlight alerts with ISO, which is what you change most during wildlife photography, but putting aperture on the ISO button, you still get live highlight alerts. It's that, that silly bar that pops up with ISO when the ISO is on the button. That is for some reason blocking live highlight alerts. So you don't have instant feedback. If you put ISO on the front dial, you have instant feedback. So for my mentorship program participants, I tell them with wildlife, put your shutter speed at 1/2500th of a second, because most of them are old. And yes, we have 8 stops of image stabilization, but they come with 6 stops of unimage stabilization, right? Right. So you're down to 2. So put your shutter speed at 1/2500th second. Leave your aperture at f5.6. You can go into photo pills. You're not gaining much going to f8 at most distances. And then you're adjusting your ISO with live highlights, and you're going to start nailing your exposure all the time.
Wow. So I've never used highlight alerts in my wildlife photography.
Oh, Rob, I need to, golly, Rob, what the hell are you doing? Guessing? Holy crap. Seriously, Rob.
Yeah, it is a crapshoot, actually.
Yes, well, let me teach you. You know what I loved when I'm a real smart ass, Rob? You know those ads on Facebook from photographers that tell people how to fix their images with Topaz and all that crap? Yeah. If I'm in a smart ass mood, I post under there, hey, come take one of my workshops and learn how to actually photograph correctly, and you won't have to fix your images.
Right.
I love that.
And the other point that you brought up about you don't have to crop. You only crop like 1%, whatever that number is. I think is really something I've tried to hammer in, but I came at it from a different direction. In that, people are always trying to compare, other sensor formats to Micro Four Thirds, and they talk about, oh, we need more resolution because I like to crop, and I'm like, the sensor is already cropped. You're already cropped. You don't need to crop more.
No, and you know why people have to crop a lot? I'm gonna step on some toes here too, because your field craft sucks. You don't know how to get close to animals. You want to shoot a warbler 125 feet away on top of a tree, backlit, crop the crap out of it, and then you post on Facebook, there's something wrong with this camera, and there's actually ding-dongs that answer trying to resolve the problem instead of saying, hey, dude, that's going to suck no matter what. Like they think that long lenses are substitutes for poor field craft. No.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Long lenses are a contributing factor to good field craft.
Yeah, and this comparison between a 300 on Micro Four Thirds and 600 on full frame doesn't make sense to me either, because these are different lenses. You have to compare a 300 millimeter lens on full frame and 300 millimeter lens on Micro Four Thirds, and that's the actual comparison. And it's part of the camera world's marketing is at fault at that too, because they're always showing these two, and I'm like, in real life, that's not how you should compare. But anyway, I digress. Let me move on to Brian here, and there we go. Like you said, you don't really have the opportunity or option to share a lot of your previous work, but because it was commercial. But
no, I don't. But I mean, a lot of what.
Well, what I was getting at is,
I was going to say a lot of what Lee just said there makes perfect sense to me, because things like the cropping, doing portrait, where I was having to, usually about 1,000 to 1,500 youngsters go through in a day, and you've got 30 seconds with each person. You've got to get things right straight away. I found actually when I went to Micro Four Thirds, it was much easier because you've got 100% viewfinder. I've been shooting on Canon 1D and 5D cameras of various models. So you suddenly find that you've got really, because you're seeing what you've got with the mirrorless system, it was a revelation. It really was a revelation to me. And it also meant my workflow increased considerably, because if something wasn't right in camera, I sort of was taking the shot. Didn't do all this chimping that I'd been doing previously on there. But the limitations that Lee was on about as well with ISO, and there's the other one, of course, if you're doing portraits, you know, you can't get a shallow bokeh, however you want to pronounce that word. I really despise that attitude, because a lot of the time people are pushing things, again, because of the internet. I'm really, although I'm a YouTuber and I talk about cameras on the YouTube, I do think an awful lot of damage is done by YouTubers. And when I first got the invitation to go in and photograph a school, a primary school in the UK, they'd already had a professional photographer in to take the photographs. And the head teacher said that all of the photographs had been returned. None of the parents wanted them because they were all out of focus. And it transpired, when I looked at it, they were perfectly in focus. The close eye was beautifully sharp. But because the professional photographer previously was basically a couple of people who just gone in to try the look of it, they'd been watching YouTube videos and been told you need the most open aperture you can to get this wonderful bokeh. So what was actually apparent to the parents as an out of focus photograph was perfectly in focus when it was on the eye. But by the time you got to the tip of the nose or the back of the ear, it was soft. Now, as photographers, we can see that, but to a client, a parent, they just think it's an out of focus photograph. So this idea that you have to conform to these rules which have been around, I think is detrimental. Now, Micro Four Thirds, I shot Micro Four Thirds I started on them in 2018. I'd taken an AM5 Mark I across to France on a shoot with a whole load of Royal Air Force cadets, along with my Canon. And I found that at the end of the week, the Canon had stayed in the bag and the Micro Four Thirds had been used because it was just much easier to use. But then I found that I say I don't do too much artistic, but I still have an artistic bent. I still want to see a good photograph. And I found that what I was getting was really good results with as much softness in the background as I wanted. And even on that, a very early camera, that OM5, but even then, I could, by taking good photographs, basically, by just taking the photograph properly, the ISO wasn't the problem. Now, as we've gone through time, the modern Micro Four Thirds cameras are amazing, yet they still seem to have this, still tarred by that image from earlier. And of course, the other thing is as well, when people are talking about lack of softness, lack of bokeh, they're trying to compare like for like, and you can't do that. They go on the numbers. You know, I shoot f2 on this, on my full frame, so therefore, and it doesn't. And I found that as I've gone through the time of Micro Four Thirds, I've got less and less into numbers. And again, like Lee was saying about some of the technology is brilliant, and it's taken us away from having to keep on gawping at numbers and trying to match up. And I hate this equivalence. Equivalence really annoys me, because my opinion is if I've got a lens, I've got a 17mm Olympus lens there. Yeah, that's an equivalent of a 34, but I don't care. I'm looking at what I go off and learn the lens. I go off and use the lens and learn what it's capable of, and know that if I want the shot like that in my mind, this is the lens I pick up, not because it's an equivalent, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. You think about the field of view, not the angle of view, so to speak. And you make a good point. I'm sorry.
Trim, obviously, because I was going to say I do trim, because a lot of the photographs I did were going into different size frames, different ratio frames. But as Lee said, getting it right as much as you can in the first place is a much faster workflow, and B, you're preserving what you've got coming off the sensor to a much larger extent.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me when you're talking about the depth of field and how parents thought the images were out of focus when actually it was focused on the eye, but the rest of them were out of focus. I run into this a lot in my event photography, where I'm taking pictures of couples. They'll be standing right next to each other, but one person will be a little out of focus because they're just slightly off that focal plane. And that's easily fixed. I can go to f5.6 and shoot with flash. And that's one of the biggest benefits for Micro Four Thirds for event photography, is that deeper depth of field, so you can get both people or the group in focus without having to crank your aperture up to like f13 and things like that. And that's something that I think like, people that might be transitioning from other systems and formats, they need to appreciate and embrace that deeper depth of field that we get with Micro Four Thirds, because it's so much more useful uh, than a shallow depth
I
of
also
field
think,
is.
Rob, as well, that we look on, we're all guilty of it, even though we like the format, we are still guilty because of the way that it's marketed, the way that everybody else talks about it, seeing the negatives. Shallow depth of field has uses, but if you look at some of the classic photographs and some of the classic wildlife photographs, they're not after shallow depth of field, they're after wide depth of field, they're after, a really long depth of field. And one of the problems is if you're using a large format camera, you're getting your lens into a place where you're starting to get it out to be able to get that depth of field. You're getting it out to the f11, f16, f22s, and you're starting to get diffraction and other problems coming in. You can, just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, you can do a good shot at f5.6 and have as much depth of field as you like on a Micro Four Thirds. It's an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
If you come at it from the right angle.
Yeah, and another thing is, I noticed, I was watching some of the Olympics and looking at some of the photos from the highlights, and I guarantee a lot of those, what do you call them? The photographers, the press that they're probably all using full frame cameras, but they're not getting any shallow depth of field in their images, primarily because it's so bright. They have to, anyway, but they're not using the shallow depth of field. They want to capture the environment of the slope of the ski hill, the crowd in the background and everything. And, and I think those made much better photos than, say, just isolating, one person in the field. So that's definitely.
Well, one of the things I used to shoot were military photographs of cadets. And they actually have, they have the flags, the standards in the background, the standard sort of military shot with the youngster 30 degrees in uniform looking in the camera. There was always a standard or a flag in the background. And they actually want that to be reasonably in focus because that's important to them. If you've got a so shallow depth of field that you've got this wonderful artistic portrait shot, but you can't see the thing which ties them to their organization in the background, you failed as a photographer. So having super shallow depth of fields was actually very detrimental if you wanted to do something like that. And the early shots I did, some of the criticisms I got when I never really thought about that was from people saying, well, you've taken the identity away. So even on portraits, shallow depth of fields aren't the be all and end all.
It is, it's definitely an issue because a lot of times you get forced to shoot wide open. And the thing people often misunderstand is that using a wide aperture like f1.8 on Micro Four Thirds, you're still getting the same exposure as you are on a full frame system, for example, at 1.8, but you're getting the advantage of that deeper depth of field. So, there's lots of ways to look at it, but I think you're right when you said that the use case and the advantages for shallow depth, or the use cases for shallow depth of field, are much narrower than the deeper depth of field. And it's really, like, that's why I use Micro Four Thirds, say, for my architectural type photography, is because I need every line and angle and every part of a room or building in focus. And it's a lot easier to do with a smaller sensor.
Can I put one more thing in about the transition? Probably the most important thing of the transition altogether. I went from shooting a 1DS Mark III or a 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV onto the first proper camera I had was the EM1 Mark I, an EM1 Mark II, and a G9. They're all considered fairly big cameras, those, for Micro Four Thirds. But when I was shooting them, I would usually be shooting on the portraits, the sort of 3/4 portraits. I used to use around about an 85mm lens on that camera. And by the time you've been there all day with that heavy camera around your neck shooting, because I never used to use a tripod because youngsters don't like being straight in front of the camera, directed inside 30 seconds. So you had to be very flexible. Carrying that around, that's my equivalent of the 85mm lens. That's the Olympus 45, so it's effectively a 90. That's what I used on my Micro Four Thirds. I could hold that camera all day and still be going and going where I would have been in probably pain on my shoulders. And as I'm getting older, I'm 64 years old now, having that and something like I take a little G100 Lumix out a lot of the time. They're not top-end cameras, but they give me the ability to actually physically hold that camera and take it, which was something I probably would have had to give up photography on if it had been sticking onto the big DSLRs.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something I show people time to time when we talk about system size in general, because they're saying, oh, you know, you can get really compact full frame systems now, and I'm like, yeah, you can get the body relatively the same size as, say, like a G9 Mark II, right? Or the original G9. You know, these were not small camera bodies. They're still relatively compact, but full frame has kind of come down. But then, okay, let's put on like a 1.8 lens or a 1.4 lens onto the system and see where you're at, right? And now carry two of those around your neck. So it adds up very quickly. And yeah, initially when you're, say, maybe in the camera store and holding it in your hand and then comparing that to, say, another system, you're like, okay, this is not bad. I think I can manage this. But yeah, after a couple hours, yeah, it adds up pretty quickly. And for those of you
I'm doing a
out
lot
there
of flying now, so the extra half weight really helps on the luggage allowance.
Right, right. So yeah, I think you brought up some great points there about the system size and the you know, the depth of field, you know, transitioning from that. You can carry, you know, a lot less. I had to buy like new camera bags and backpacks because my old ones were just too big for Micro Four Thirds, and I can carry a lot more in a smaller bag because of the lenses and the rest of the system, and get, you know, get along just fine, right? In terms of the kind of photography that I do. Because mostly my gear, like when I go in the field, is with flash gear, right? I have to carry larger flashes. Those haven't changed much. But you know, but now I can carry two backup bodies and two lenses in just one little messenger bag with the flash gear that I need. Okay, so that was awesome. So let me come to you, Chris, because you've been basically a Micro Four Thirds shooter your entire photography career, and so you haven't had to worry, but you know, you see other people with the other systems time to time, and you know,
yeah, I see a lot of people, workshops, or people ask me questions, or even people that are considering switching. You know, I talk to a lot of people that have shot on another system, and it seems like they always come at it from a perspective of worrying about what they'll miss or what they're going to lose based on these oftentimes myths, or, you know, the chat room and comment area chatter about, oh, well, you can't do this, or you're not going to be able to do that, or this is going to suffer, rather than thinking about what they're going to gain and what they're going to be able to deliver, or the shots that they'll be able to get that they couldn't get. You know, Lee and Brian talked about getting into places where you couldn't get with your bigger camera, or focusing from closer than you could with a different system, or being able to shoot for longer, or being able to shoot handheld when you couldn't. So all of those things, the extra depth of field. So there are perceived pros and perceived cons, but if you come at it thinking like, oh, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, rather than I'm going to be able to do this and I'm going to be able to do that, that's very different. So I think when people start to look at the advantages and the things that you'll gain, and what you can do versus what you can't, that's a really good perspective to take when you're considering the transition, and then weigh it out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know,
I also see people shooting in fear, and I know Lee will talk about this and feels this way for sure, but shooting in fear of high ISO, shooting in fear of, you know, my camera isn't good enough, rather than focusing on making compelling images that tell compelling stories, that look beautiful, that, you know, bring people into the moment, rather than thinking about the technical shortcomings that you might feel like you're holding in your hand, which oftentimes are misplaced feelings anyway.
Yeah, and you know, I like how you put that about there's always compromises to every system and every choice that you make. Uh, and looking at what you can do with Micro Four Thirds that you couldn't do, say, with another system is a great way to look at it. Because you're not giving up much across the board, but you're gaining so much more in terms of workflow. Because I found OM systems, and because I only mention them because I'm most familiar with that camera system. Because Lumix and Panasonic make great Micro Four Third cameras as well. But the workflow and the thought that they put into the system is what converted another member of mine in the photo club that was shooting like the latest Nikon Z6 III and had all the, he was all in, right? He had all the lenses, and he wanted to try an OM system for macro. And I said, you're doing macro. I got my 300 here. Why don't you try this and do some of the swans and stuff that we have? And within 30 to 60 days, he was all in on Micro Four Thirds and got rid of his Z3 and lenses and everything, just like that. And the number one thing he said that the compromise in image quality was minimal, if any, particularly in macro, there was none, but it was the workflow and the things that he could do with the Micro Four Thirds system, with the in-camera stacking and bracketing, for the macro and the pro capture and high-speed shutter, for the wildlife. And that's what converted him was what he can do with Micro Four Thirds and not what he was giving up. And then, of course, also the size and weight was also a very compelling reason for him to switch. He's not an old guy. He's a young guy.
Well, Rob, we can get into all of the advantages and reasons why we all shoot with the system we shoot with, but you mentioned macro and whether there's any compromise there or not. And of course, I think that any perceived compromise are greatly outweighed by the benefits. But for me, just the one point would be I've never made a macro image in the field with a tripod. Every single photo that I've ever shared with anyone has been made handheld.
Wow.
And I really don't believe that would be the case if I was shooting with a larger system, right? So
yeah.
Just that one benefit alone is enough to keep me shooting with OM system. But of course, there's other reasons as well.
Right. And there's so many things in the system that only now are some camera systems starting to catch up on in macro. Like I know Sony for the longest time, you couldn't even do focus bracketing. And a lot of Canon cameras, you can't use flash with focus bracketing. Just little things that OM systems, put into their cameras to make that workflow and the kind of results you can get much easier, right? But okay, that's definitely a great way to look at it if you're thinking about transitioning or trying out Micro Four Thirds from another system. Is what are you gaining, right? What are you gaining? And think about look at all the things that you're gaining, and that's not always obvious when you're comparing camera systems, So I really appreciate that perspective. That's a new one. You guys really gave some great perspectives about transitioning and some of the myths that we have. Do you feel like and let me just go back to Lee real quick. Let's see if I can switch that. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit to the wildlife side because you intrigued me with this using the highlights, the highlight blinkies for wildlife. Just never even occurred to me, but I will have to make some new videos. So, or people can go to your channel and watch, right? But let me check my note here. I did write down a specific question. Yeah, with Pro Capture, I remember watching a video of yours where you talked about you like to use 50 frames per second to get that perfect wing, right? Wing position in the frame. And I wanted to, and that makes perfect sense because I used to shoot at like, 10 to 25 frames per second intentionally because I was worried about just coming back home with 8,000 images, uh, from like a couple hours. And I wanted to kind of ask you about, how does SH2 or Pro Capture, what are your settings for those kind of things? If you use those things, is that part of your workflow? Because SH2 is great, 50 frames per second, but I didn't remember anything about you talking about Pro Capture specifically, if that's something you use.
Yeah. So I love ProCap, but I see people that use Pro Capture for things that you can predict. So Pro Capture is best utilized for one thing and one thing only. That is for situations that you can't predict. Now, having said that, Rob, our fieldcraft, our knowledge of animal and bird behavior is going to vary from photographer to photographer. So what I can predict a bird is about to do or a mammal may be quite different than one of my clients, right? So waterfowl, cranes, raptors, I can go on and on. They're very easy to predict when they're about to take off. Okay, ducks are going to have that neck extension. Their body's going to have a bit of a forward tilt to it. They're getting ready to launch. Whereas songbirds, warblers, they're not giving you a clue, right? I'll show you. Let me pop up. I was in the Galapagos, and a sea lion had just given birth. Okay, so there's afterbirth on the beach, and the sea lion and the pup are, I don't know, 30 feet away, 40 feet away. With the wind direction, frigate birds were coming down and snapping bits off the afterbirth. Good morning breakfast start there in the Galapagos.
Right.
Well, I immediately knew that ProCap SH2 is not my go-to one because the background was dark. Frigate birds are dark. It was low light. And I did not want to try to acquire focus on a bird as it came into the frame and follow it as it left. I would miss a lot of shots. And I got down low. Most of my clients, the other guy, they went up high because it was easier to see. Well, it was easier to see, but it didn't give you this shot. So I'm going to show you why there is no, a lot of people want to find the one size fits all. Okay. So the one size fits all approach is really bad for wildlife photography. So I got down low. I used focus peaking on the afterbirth. Okay. And at a SH1 at 120 frames per second, when I first saw the scenario, I thought, wow, I hope I get a couple of shots of this. Okay. I will tell you, I have 700 amazing shots, and I picked through what I found was the most visually compelling. I deleted shots that people be entering in their camera club contest because I know what settings are going to work in that situation. Do you see the dark background? Low light. This is ISO 8000. Okay. 2500th of a second. And I'm shooting at basically 700 millimeters, right? I mean, I'm tight. Autofocus would have struggled in this situation because when the birds dip down, it's a fraction of a second. So I knew that I wanted them to come into the plane of focus, then go out. And the plane of focus was on the afterbirth, So right. That is a situation where I couldn't predict when those frigate birds were coming in, and I was so close, I didn't have time to follow them in. I just had time to look through. I did keep my left eye open so I'd see the shadow of the bird, and I just boom hammer with SH1, use a great memory card, and never missed a shot with it. Okay. So that's 120 frames per second. And you used a phrase, well, I'm worried about coming home with 8,000 images. Here's how I think. I'm worried about coming home with one visually compelling image. I don't care. Nobody ever says, how many images did it take you to get that shot? I've yet to have that question asked. Oh, that's a great shot, but how many did you take to get it? I've never had that question. So with Photomechanic, I can cull 10,000 images in 15 minutes. That's the rapid cull. Then I do a more detailed cull later. But I'm telling you, don't worry about how many images you're getting. Worry about how many killer images you can delete because you've got so many. So with 50 frames per second, we can shoot it up to ISO 12.8. Okay. So above ISO 12.8, you got to drop to silent sequential. So we go from 50 to 20 frames per second. Now I want OM System. I'm going to send them an email. I want them to give me a drive mode that automatically makes that shift back and forth because it's a pain in the butt to remember to go back and forth from SH2. You can easily with the press of a button, but I just like having to keep track of it. So when you're thinking about the number of shots, I have accidentally left it in silent sequential when I wanted to be an SH2, and I'll have some event and I'll think, oh, I kicked that butt. And then I get back, and as soon as I upload my images, I can tell I was at 20, not 50. Because think about it, you're capturing more than 2 times the images at 50 versus 20.
Right. Sorry, your camera switched, Lee. Oops. Sorry, Lee, you need to, there we go. Now I don't have audio. Still no audio. There we go. Now you're back.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to use Lumix. I don't want Panasonic. I'm going to tell you, I've never had anybody with a Panasonic in the field with me, and there's a variety of reasons why I would never go to Panasonic. I know a lot of y'all like it. Great, awesome, have a ball. I will outshoot most folks with Panasonic standing next to me in terms of the images we capture. So
you'll outshoot most people with an OM system camera.
Well, listen, I think Chris will tell you, I probably push the gear to the max as much as anybody out there. Okay. Like if I'm going to buy a Ferrari, I'm not driving it in second gear. Why the hell do I want to drive a Ferrari in second gear? I'm going to put it in 10, and then I'm going to see if I can get past the red line. I think Chris will tell you, been out in the field with me, I push our gear to the absolute max of what we can do. Right. So I know what works and what doesn't in terms of what is it capable of. Okay. So what you got to know is this a situation, if you're going to use ProCap, is this a situation I'm likely to be able to maintain focus or not? Like a butterfly jumping off a flower. You ever tried that with autofocus? I mean, butterflies are ridiculous. You know, skippers and most of them, they're so random in their behavior. Well, autofocus just looks at you and go, really? You want me to try that for a lot? So I'm going to try SH1, and they're out of frame quickly. Right? Yeah. They're out of frame quick. So ProCap is mostly for things that are going to be split second, you know, like for lightning during the day. I'd prefer to use live composite when it's dark enough, but for lightning during the day, I'm going to go with ProCap, probably just regular ProCap because the duration of lightning isn't that long. Right? So you got to know, what is my subject? Can I keep focus? Will the camera be able to change it? Because ProCap is happening so fast, you're not adjusting exposure. Okay.
Right.
So that's why I make the difference between I'm in SH2 for wildlife. I also drives me nuts when I hear photographers program, I'm going to have one for birds and one for birds in flight, a custom mode. Well, that's stupid. You really have time to switch between custom modes to get to a bird in flight. So your exposure is not going to be correct if it's already correct. That's just a waste of time. I want people to program their camera to be ready for whatever happens in the wildlife world. Because if you're sitting there, let's say you're sitting there shooting a portrait of a gull, and out of the corner of your eye, here comes an eagle trying to catch a gull right in front of you. You really think you're gonna have time to switch go to another custom mode, now reset your exposure and get that shot? You have no hope. You have no hope of doing that. So
wow. So if someone's going to field with you, let's say you have your group there, what settings do you tell them to start with right off the bat?
Every wildlife photographer out there. Most of them, because they believe the low ISO nonsense, okay? Most of them believe in image stabilization to the extent that they forget that animals move, right? They really get to the point where their shutter speeds are almost always too low. Beginner and intermediate wildlife photographers, their they don't understand how fast things occur. Yes, you can probably photograph a great blue heron flying at 1/840th of a second, but you're not stopping a peregrine at 1/840th of a second, right? So if y'all will just do this, put ISO on the front dial, turn on the live highlight alerts. If you got the 150 to 400, put it at 5.6. If you got a 150 to 600 or 100 to 400, put your aperture at 6.3 and don't touch it for a while. Put your shutter speed at 1/2500th of a second. Use live highlight alerts. And I bet you if you just do that for a while, I guarantee your photography is going to get better. I guarantee you. I have taken a tack sharp shot at half a second with the 150 to 400, but the bird wasn't moving. I was just testing what I could do. I've done a sign at 1 second with that lens, but why do we want to push it unless we're doing something creative?
Right, right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. 2500th of a second, highlight alerts on, and whatever subject detect modes you want to use.
So subject detect mode, here you go. Bird works great for almost all birds. It works pretty well for reptiles and amphibians where they have distinct eyes.
Mm.
It works okay for some macro subjects, insects, until they start getting really multifaceted eyes. Mammal photography is really good for animals that have heads shaped like dogs and cats, unless they're super close and their eye is very distinct. A bison in most lighting conditions will make subject detection lose its mind. So you got to know when to switch off of subject detection. So I program subject detection to the plus minus exposure compensation button, because with live highlight alerts, keeping track of exposure compensation is such a waste of time. So silly. You don't need it. So I can reprogram that button to turn subject detection on and off. Right. If you're going to forget something, leave bird photography detection on for mammals rather than mammal on for birds. There's a big difference.
So when you reprogram the exposure compensation button to switch the subject mode on and off,
Here, right?
So when you're adjusting for exposure, you don't use exposure compensation. Are you adjusting the ISO on that front dial?
ISO's front dial, shutter speed is back, and aperture gets moved to the ISO button. So you have to reprogram the ISO button to the exposure compensation function. That's an important distinction. So we have an exposure compensation button and an exposure compensation function. Those are different, right? And then program the red record button. Turn that stupid thing off high res, because for wildlife, that's the worst setting in the world, right? So turn it off high res and put that on the subject selection function. So I've got subject detection on the exposure compensation and subject selection on the red, and that's that focus lock. And then you can use the directional pad to change from one subject to another. Now that will occasionally change, and I've got other strategies for, like, if I'm photographing birds in a flock flying by or herds running by regularly, I have a different strategy. But that's a great starting point. But I beg my clients, just do this for all. And all of a sudden they're all like, look, it's sharp. Well, yeah, no crap, because your shutter speed's where it's supposed to be.
Right, right. Wow, those are awesome tips, and certainly I can see where that would get you ready for anything very quickly that happens in the field.
Oh, Chris asked a great question. Can I explain the rationale of shooting at 5.6 instead of 4.5 with the 150 to 400?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, bud. That's a great question. All right. I start out at 1,000 millimeters almost every time. Okay. Well, with the built-in teleconverter switched on, our aperture is 5.6. So if I'm using live highlight alerts and I've set my exposure at 4.5, and then I flick on my teleconverter, my exposure is wrong. So if you're at 5.6, then you can turn this on and off to your heart's content. You can flip this switch, baby, and you're not worrying about it. And if you go into Photo Pills app and go to depth of field and put in this lens, and you look at the difference between 4.5 and 5.6, you're talking tiny fractions of an inch, right? And you're only gaining, a little bit of light. So it's not worth it. Whatever your focal range, whatever your maximum aperture is, right? With your telephoto lens, whichever lens you're shooting, just keep your aperture there so you're not messing up your exposure as you zoom in and out or as you flip on a teleconverter.
Wow, yeah, that was a great question, because a lot of times people think about that application in video where, yeah, you're always adjusting things and you want to fix the aperture. So they'll raise the aperture, particularly on variable aperture lenses, to one that's constant no matter what zoom length you're in.
That's right. Put it at the max, and then you're not messing up your exposure. And I did a video about stop leaving focal length on the table. All these people brag about their focal length, and then when they send me their images, when they do a private class, I'm like, you have up to 500 millimeter. Your average focal length is 287, and now you're cropping the crap out of your images. Well, I have a hard time finding the subject. Well, practice.
Yeah, and well, for me, it didn't take much to work with the 300 millimeter with the 1.4x fixed prime, the birds are still feel like they're still too far away a lot of times, even with that. But yeah, it doesn't take long to get used to working. Just pick up the camera and you can get the bird in the frame. I like to use the hot shoe and that parallax with the front of the lens.
Yeah. Actually, what I tell people, okay, is, of course, I grew up hunting, and if people have a problem with that, I don't care, but I did. So what I try to do is line up, your little dial on the 150 to 400 on the lens hood.
Mm-hmm.
Line that up with the flash shoe, and when you're trying to track a subject, a wildlife subject, people start from the camera down here or lower. Okay, put it directly below your eye. So as you're following the bird, you have very short distance to go.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll help a lot of people that are learning, trying to track subjects.
Yeah, and the few people I've told to do something like that, they adapt it very quickly, and they use that technique a lot now. So yeah, awesome tips. So Brian and Chris, I wanted to sort of get into the images that we can share. So if you can get those ready, but I'll go to Chris real quick. Let's see, because shifting gears a little bit to macro photography. What is your basic gear recommendations, and some initial setups? Because I remember when I went to one of your workshops, you gave me some great tips, and I still use those same exact settings and tips that you gave even today. And I thought maybe you could share that with us today.
Sure. So first of all, I think that a lot of people, when they hear what I'm about to say, they think it's almost too simple. But I think that it doesn't have to be complicated. And when I started with macro, I certainly wasn't prepared to approach things from a complicated perspective. So I wanted it to be simple. And to answer the gear question first, you need a camera body. You need a macro lens. So OM System makes the 30, 60, and 90. I would say for in the field with live subjects, the 60 or the 90 are where you want to be. The 30 is really small. It's really lightweight. It has good magnification, but the working distance is really, really short. And it doesn't have a lot of the advantages that the 60 and the 90 do. So 60 or 90 macro on whatever the body that you can afford, that you have. All of them have the focus bracketing, focus stacking features in them. The more expensive, the higher performance bodies are going to have more images and more capabilities. Of course, they're going to have better focusing. So I use the OM1 Mark II, but you can go back several generations and you're still going to have a lot of these features available. And then, so you've got your camera body, you've got your macro lens, then a flash. I use the FL700WR. That's a pretty small flash. It's weather sealed, which is great because I like to shoot in the rain and the cold, and you never have to worry about it. I've been out for days on end in Costa Rica shooting in downpours, and I've never had even a thought of an issue with that setup. And but if you're more of a fair weather photographer, there's no reason not to use a Godox or Flashpoint flash if you're shopping at Adorama. It's just the same Godox flashes. They work really well, and there's some advantages. There's some lithium-ion battery flashes available. They're more affordable, but they do lack some of the features that OM's flash has.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that people forget, the fourth component, is a diffuser. So a flash diffuser. And from a simple perspective, any diffusion is better than no diffusion because it's going to soften your light to some degree, whether it's a homemade diffuser or something that you buy commercially. But something that's really purpose-built for macro photography, like the Cygnus Tech diffuser, the AK diffuser, the MK diffuser. There are several kind of boutique diffusers available where it's someone who's a macro enthusiast that decided I'm going to design and custom make these diffusers. Those are the way to go, in my opinion. And of course, you can get more advanced. You can shoot off camera and you can diffuse that flash as well. But really the vast majority, what I'm doing is with that setup of those 4 pieces: camera, lens, flash, and diffuser.
Right, right. Okay. Quick question I had, because I've been shopping the 90 macro. I have
Yeah.
the 60 now. But you know, two things that the 90 macro does that the 60 doesn't is, you know, it has image stabilization built in, and it also, you can use teleconverters with it. If you could tell me your experience with those two, you know, features that have made a difference, say, versus using the 60 macro, aside
Yeah.
from the magnification part, or
Well, yeah, I was going to say, before I get to the image stabilization and the teleconverters with the 90, it's important to remember that the 90 does offer quite a lot over not only the 60, but most other macro lenses on the market, right? It is that
I'm
2x
sorry,
native
you
magnification.
keep talking. I'm sorry. I have to, something just came up. I have to, I'll just be 1 minute though. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good. I'll get to his specific question after I kind of sing the praises of the 90. So the 90 offers coating on the lens. It has the image stabilization that Rob mentioned. It has 2x magnification, which is, you know, at the really high end of any macro lens that you can buy on the market. It works with the teleconverters. It has the manual focus clutch, which some people love, some people hate. It has a little bit more working distance than the 60. So a lot of people will ask me things like, oh, am I going to get better macro images with the 90? I already have the 60. Should I get the 90? Am I going to get better images with that? And that's not really the reason why you get the 90. You get the 90 for all of the comprehensive advantages that the 90 offers. The 60 is capable of fantastic, sharp macro images. It's been around for a long time. It's been great since day one. It's really compact. It can take really nice images, and you're going to be able to make really nice images with it if you have the skill to do so. But so is the 90. The 90 only really has one disadvantage when it's compared to the 60, and that's the size, right? And the price, I guess. But it's more expensive and it's bigger. But as far as performance goes, it's going to do everything the 60 can and more. But image quality is pretty negligible between the two. So Rob specifically asked about image stabilization and teleconverters. So I'll answer the teleconverters portion of the question first, because when the 90 was first announced and the compatibility with teleconverters was part of that announcement, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get these insanely high magnification images that I've always dreamt of. I can't believe I can go up to this 8x equivalent when you have teleconverter attached. And I have never shot that way, except for right when I first got the 90, when I was first testing the 90. So I had the opportunity to test the 90 before its launch date. And OM Systems said, oh, make sure you test it with the teleconverters. We want to see sample images with the 1.4 and the 2x teleconverter. I said, oh, absolutely. This is really exciting. And it works great. You get higher magnification. But I realized very quickly that the native magnification of the 90 is enough for 95% of what I wanted to do. So that advantage for the way that I shoot, of shooting beyond 2x native magnification, wasn't really that exciting. Now, for people that do shoot super high magnification macro, especially of static subjects, maybe they're on a tripod, maybe they're in a more controlled setting than I typically shoot in, it's an unbelievable advantage and a great tool for that. So for me, I don't really use the teleconverters very often. Once in a while, snowflakes or certain things, I'll pop a teleconverter on, but not as much as I expect it to. The image stabilization essentially stays on all the time. So with the 90 and the higher magnification, having image stabilization is just one more factor in allowing you to get really sharp photos. So like I already mentioned, I'm never shooting with a tripod when I'm in the field. So having that image stabilization helped me to get sharper images, stabilize my shots. It's always on.
So, like, even when you're shooting static subjects like mushrooms or, I don't know, whatever else is down there, you just do that handheld.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even bring a tripod with me, right? Like,
wow.
I don't want to lug extra crap into the field and have to worry about setting something up. And then as soon as I get set up, something moves or something else happens and that freedom to be able to move around and be agile and crawl into positions is a way bigger benefit than a tripod could offer me. So
wow,
just not how I'm approaching my day in the
you
field.
know, maybe you don't have that what do they call it? The like Lee was saying, you know, you have about 4 stops of image stabilization that you have to kind of build in because you're not as stable. You have to subtract 4 stops. So,
but I'm also shooting with a flash, right? So I mentioned one of the pieces of my equation for macro is using a flash. And when you're shooting with flash, you can shoot with much, much slower shutter speeds than you can without a flash. So a lot of people have never shot with flash. They're intimidated by it, or a lot of times you'll hear, oh, I'm a natural light photographer. And I found that more often than not, when someone says that, that just means that they don't know how to use a flash, or they're afraid to, right? Not that there's anything wrong with shooting natural light. You can make beautiful images from natural light. But when someone makes that claim, you have to think, well, they probably just don't know what they're doing with flash. So with a flash, you're shooting at shutter speeds that if someone doesn't understand what they're looking at, they might think, how could you possibly get a sharp image at 1/80th of a second or 1/100th of a second, right? Just my vibrations and the wind and things are going to make motion blur in that image. But that's not the case, because that added element of the light flashing is going to be able to stop motion more effectively than the speed of the shutter. So I asked the question of Lee about why shoot at 5.6 versus 4.5, and it's kind of the same concept as shooting at 1/100th of a second with macro. So I set my default, my starting point of 1/100th of a second. And people will say, well, why do you shoot at 100th of a second? You can sync to a 250th of a second. Isn't 250th of a second better because it's faster? It's going to stop that motion blur. And maybe, but I'm switching back and forth to focus bracketing a lot. And when I switch to focus bracketing, the maximum sync speed is 1/100th of a second. So if I'm shooting at 1/250th and I say, oh, I want to click over to focus bracketing, now my exposure's wrong. And it took me a little while years ago to realize that. And at the time it was 50th of a second because of an older camera body. But I was losing valuable time in fixing my exposure in between shots. So I said, okay, once the OM1 came out and OM1 Mark II is the same way, OM3, 1/100th of a second is that max speed, and that works great for the vast majority of what I'm doing. So I start at 1/100th of a second, and then to take the next step into, you know, the basic settings, my default aperture with the 90, I start at I think f11 is my base setting. And if I'm using the 60, I would start at f8 or f9. So that's just because the 90 inherently gives you a little bit less depth of field. So I'm closing that aperture just a tiny bit more to kind of balance it. And then I can go from there. I can open or close from there, but I'm starting at 100th of a second, f11. And my ISO is at 200. And my ISO is at 200 because that's the native ISO that our sensors are made to work at. So any manufacturer is going to have a base ISO that your sensor is designed to work its best. So if you go above that, 400, 800, 25, 600, you're straining the sensor, you're introducing more noise, and it can be pretty minimal. It doesn't necessarily mean if you go to 400, your image is going to be crap, or you go to 800, they're going to be even worse. But any deviation from that starting point of 200 is going to technically be worse. And what people don't realize is it works the other way as well. So 100, the low ISOs, are also not where that sensor was designed to work. They're technically slightly worse as well. So I'm starting at 200, and I'm using the flash to bring light to the party. I'm not worrying about using ISO to bring light to the party.
With the FL700, what flash power do you use, or do you use TTL?
Yeah, great question. I do not use TTL. TTL's fine. You're going to be able to get pretty good results with it. But I found very early on that it's not that hard to manage the flash power. It can just be a trial and error that happens very quickly. And once you get some experience, the error in the trial reduces quite a bit. So I'll start at about an 8th power, 8th to a 16th power. And then I'll go from there. You know, so
with the
ambient light's gonna
diffuser.
come into play. With the diffuser, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's great. And that's kind of what I picked up from you when we were in the field when we met, is those exact settings with the 60 macro, you know, f8, f9, about 1/8 power. I was shooting more like 1/32 power because I didn't have a diffuser at the time. But you know, like you said, it doesn't take much to learn the flash power output. So those things all come together. And yeah, really, right off the bat, my very first shot with those settings that you gave me, I got the perfect exposure and a great shot very quickly. And so that's really great to get started. And then, of course, you know, there's all the adjustments you can make in the field for creative reasons. But if you just want to take a macro shot, I think those are great settings to start with to get you a great shot right up front.
Yeah, one comment real quick about the flash power, Rob. People might not understand, especially if you're new to flash. If you have one and you've been afraid to take it out of the box, put it on your camera, I strongly encourage you to test it. It's winter time where a lot of us live, and it's a good time to practice inside. But when the flash is at full power, which is 1/1, right? That full power. Not only are you going to get bright light from the flash, which can be not so great looking in your results, or just too bright, your flash is going to take longer to recycle between shots.
Yeah.
So you kind of want the lowest amount of power that you need, and you're going to get the greatest benefit and the greatest performance out of your flash. So if you're, you know, using good batteries, full batteries, I use Eneloop Pro batteries all the time. Good battery power and low flash power, you can fire off a lot of shots in rapid succession. People will ask me, "Oh, you shot, you know, 60 images in that focus stack of that spider's face. How did you get it to stay still so long? Or how would your flash recycle fast enough?" Well, if I was at a 16th power, I can probably shoot 6 frames a second. So yeah, it's 8 or 10 seconds of staying still. But if the spider stays still and I'm kind of in good position, it's possible. It's not like it's 30 seconds or a minute of hand holding staying still.
Right. And then one last minor setting, since we've already kind of deep dived into it, is the focus differential that you like to use, say, with a 60 and a 90 without any teleconverter.
Yeah, focus differential is really tricky because it really depends on quite a few things. It depends on what you're looking for. It depends on what aperture you're shooting at. It depends on your distance from your subject. But I'll answer it in how I set it for the type of shots that I'm typically using it for. So with the 90, I have my focus differential for bracketing set to 2, which is a very narrow differential. So it starts at 1, goes up to 10. And I want that narrow differential because I'm taking very, very small steps in focus from shot to shot at very high magnification. So I found that that setting kind of gives me what I need to make the focus stacks that I'm looking to. If you open up that differential too much, say high magnification f8 at a focus differential of 5, you may get gaps in focus. So you're taking a shot here, and the next one's here, and the next one's here, and those shots will be in focus, but there will be missed focus in between, and then you can't really make a good stack.
Right.
So I'm typically at 2 for those high magnification shots. And then when I'm using in-camera focus stacking with the 90, I think I actually have it set to 3 or 4 because I'm usually using focus stacking in camera for subjects that are a little bit larger and I'm a little bit further away. So I can take a little bit bigger step. But that's something that, again, great time of year, great to practice with inanimate subjects. Take, you know, little nuts and bolts or, you know, pieces of something and practice on tabletop inside the house, because that does take some practice to understand what works and what doesn't.
Right, right. Okay, so there's, you know, just like with wildlife photography, macro photography has a lot of very specific settings and very specific techniques in the field, like, you know, of course, field craft, finding subjects, but also, you know, stabilization techniques of, you know, tucking your elbows or around your knees. There's so many things that I would recommend people to further explore, because we could spend 2 hours on all of it, because there were so many things when and that's why it's great to go to a workshop, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, is you get the whole picture of everything of what it takes to really get that shot. It's not just the settings and the camera and the gear, but there's that field craft and also that technique of, you know, how you hold the camera and how you get more stable shots. Because I still use a little tabletop tripod, one form or another, either for the flash or for the camera itself for like mushrooms and things. But I totally get how if you do it all the time, you have the experience. You don't really need to bring all that gear, and you can get a great shot just like that. And okay, that was a great lesson. I'm sorry I missed the first 2 minutes of that. My neighbor only comes over to my house once every, maybe twice a year, so it was weird for him to come to my house. Anyway, so sorry for that interruption on my end. But Brian, I wanted to come to you because you're going to come at this from a whole different perspective, I think. And if you have a few pictures ready that you can share possibly and talk about those. But your experience with Micro Four Thirds, you know, you went to Micro Four Thirds, I think, because of the form factor and all of the
Well, yeah, it was
benefits.
one of the
Yeah, go ahead.
Micro Four Thirds was one of those things which people were talking about, but I didn't really have any experience of using. And I bought this AM5 and a cheap little 14 to 42 Lumix lens just to try it out. And I was knocked out because what we forget about, we're now in 2026, and we forget just how amazingly innovative these cameras were when they came out in the sort of late 2010s, early 2012 or whatever. They were amazing. So when you were going from what we had, you had this fantastic new technology, IBIS, like you wouldn't believe. We've just been talking about the technique that you use. I quite often like going and getting an old DSLR camera, because I equate this, if you've been driving modern cars which have these touch screens, which have super smooth engines with 200 horsepower in a normal saloon car, try going back to a car from the 60s. It's still a car, it's still got four wheels, but try driving that. It's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
And I think we take an awful lot for granted in the modern cameras. And maybe that's why I'm less swayed by some of the new technology coming out even now, because it's going that little bit further. But for me, every so often I'll go and get a DSLR out and try taking photographs, and try and get decent photographs which aren't blurry, because you don't have the IBIS capabilities. If you have anything even in the lens, we just take it for granted that you have 5, 6, 7, 8 stops of image stabilization.
Right.
The fact of trying to do like the stacked focus and things like that we're talking about, just trying to do something like that. Photographers did do these things. Photographers have done these for decades. And the worry I actually have is not with my colleagues here, not with people who are specializing in their skill set there, but I think new photographers can very quickly not have the base level skill sets to utilize the advantages of the technology so well. They go straight to the technology, and I think it could put people off. And that's where I come from. I'm in a different position to most. And a lot of my photography's changed since it's pre-COVID and post-COVID. I'm going to bring a photograph up now, if I can, if this works. And we talked before about the fact that I did press photography. Well, the very first press photo I did and got into paper, this was I'll just try and get it onto that if it comes up. That was a photograph that I took the very first one, which was on the EM5 Mark 1. And it got into photographs. It was a technology tournament, which a Rotary Club was running. And that was inside a piece of, you can see the sort of vignette on that. That was actually inside a drain pipe. And I couldn't have got my DSLRs into that drain pipe to take a shot like that. I couldn't have done that shot to get it in there. And it was very, if you'd seen the other shots around it, this comes into context. But for me, that was such a revelation that I had a camera small enough to do that, with a quality good enough to do it, where I could actually very easily adapt it quickly to get the shot right if it wasn't. And as it happens on things like this, it's a little bit overexposed for me, but you know, you could knock me down. It's a long time ago that I did this. But to be perfectly honest, this was probably the pivotal point for me going to Micro Four Thirds, because it was easy to carry around all day. It did the job. I got it published in the local newspaper on my very first shoot. Quite often with a DSLR, you know, there'd be interest, but you wouldn't get shots in. This was in and paid for. So that was, I'll just try and stop sharing that if I can. Has that gone down? So that was probably the pivot point for Micro Four Thirds for me. Now, post-COVID, I've stopped my photography business. I don't do the commercial shoots anymore. I shoot for myself. And one of the beauties I've found in this conversation up to now, you've got Lee doing some amazing stuff with wildlife and nature stuff on there. And as he said, you know, pushing the camera to its limits. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a technophobe insofar as saying we don't need the march forward of the technology, because I think what it does is allows people with the skill sets of these two guys that I'm sharing the screen with, it allows them to really flourish. But I do worry if some of the people who are lower down in the skill levels in photography are struggling somewhat, because it makes a big gap to be able to get into. Yes, you can do the technology. I could have exactly the same camera as either of those guys, and I can guarantee I won't get the same shots they will. And it doesn't matter what I do, because I don't have those skill levels. And I worry sometimes that we don't develop those skills in the more novice levels of photography. But also, you know, I'm going to go back with another photograph into what we talked about earlier on, which was the format itself, the negativity around Micro Four Thirds. Oh, you know, high ISOs, full of noise, and you can't get a decent sort of shallow depth of field. So again, these are just things I just pulled out in the stock that I've taken years ago. So they're not necessarily the greatest of photographs, but they show, for me, they show an example. That is taken on just the left 1.8 45 mil. Now that is nicely out of focus. I can't see really what any even more out of focus would give me. But that wasn't a big fancy technical shoot. Literally, it was a point and shoot with a lens. The lens fitted what I wanted to do, but it was opened up at f1.8, and it gave me that shallow depth of field. I think I managed to get a shallow depth of field from a Micro Four Thirds camera. So, you know, on that one, I get concerned that we look very negative on what we do. And the other one is a building over here in Cyprus, and I just took this a year or two back. And it was literally wandering around in the night, in the evening, with no particular photographic purpose. But there's a building just off from the old town in Paphos that was taken handheld at night, probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. The only light is what's seen around the buildings there. But the sky itself is black. It's jet black. There's no nasty noise. There's no horribleness on that. And in actual fact, with the difference between the white on the building and the background, there's actually quite a lot of dynamic range there. The difference between light and dark is quite extreme. The camera handled it, didn't even think about what it was doing. You know, it was just a case I picked the camera up, dialed in what I wanted to do, and took just a tourist photograph. But it did what I wanted it to.
Yep.
So when we're very negative about Micro Four Thirds, that makes me question why. Now, fair enough, you've got to have an idea of some of the ways to take a photograph. That's fine. But we're so negative about this format. Or maybe we aren't. Maybe we're the informed, the enlightened ones.
Yes.
And it's the rest of the world that seems to be negative about it. We just pick up on those vibes. Because as I said, I picked up this that Micro Four Thirds guy because I was being known around the place as the guy who always turned up with this little silly camera, whereas everybody else had these great big DSLRs. And, you know, it was that, oh, the Micro Four Thirds guy's back again. He's always spouting on about how fantastic it is. And from that, I could only really see the positives in it. Now I'm in a different position to my colleagues there. They're both shooting professionally now. They're out to really push the limits of their art. I'm 64 now. I've retired. I've done the commercial shots. I've done what I needed to do. But now I actually just want to go out and enjoy my photography and have fun. And this comes into what I was saying about losing my mojo somewhat, to lose my interest. I had a lot of other things in life coming over here, which were taking precedent. And I found that I wasn't being inspired. And one of the things that I'm enjoying, and again, Micro Four Thirds, I think, over DSLRs, and I keep on putting myself into this thing, what would I be doing? If I had my 5D Mark III or 5D Mark IV, what would I be doing on this? And I keep on referring to the DSLRs because I never really shot mirrorless full frame. I've tried it a little times, but I've been so happy with what I get Micro Four Thirds wise that I've not been inclined to go and spend an absolute fortune to change the system. And also, as I say, I mean, I've got a little D100 there, little Lumix D100.
Yeah.
I've got a 24mm, sorry, the 20mm lens on the front, the f2.5. I can go all over the place with this and put it in my pocket. It's I think this is the 20 meg sensor on this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I think it's a 20 meg sensor on this one. I think it's 16 meg. It's not a flash camera, but this will get me all sorts of things that I want to, just to record an instant in time. I've changed how my channel is going because I'm shooting without rules. And I've got a little bit tired of following the rules. You know, you've got to have, you've got to have a photograph where you've got your rule of thirds and all this comes in. I'm just getting tired of doing that.
Yeah.
And part of the inspiration now is just taking a small camera out with a lens. And I'll be honest, you know, that lens, I've had two of these. The first one is in the North Sea somewhere because it rolled off a table. At sea houses. So this is my second one. But this thing, you know, you take it off the camera. It's such a small little thing. It's just does what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the quality of it is superb. I've got a little the 12 to 32 pancake zoom for these. You can't even adjust the focus on it manually because it doesn't have a focus ring. But you stick it on the front of something like this. You go out and you've got an instant small zoom camera which will fit in your pocket, which will allow me to take photographs which will inspire me. Because I've also realized that I've taken probably hundreds of thousands of photographs professionally, most of them not something which would appeal to me because they were for clients or for a specific purpose. So now I'm taking photographs which people will say, it's tourist. You think, actually, yes. I'm in a new country, I'm exploring things. And why can't we use a camera for something which doesn't have to be? And that's not to belittle anybody who's doing professional shooting and things. Don't get me wrong, but I've now left the professional shooting thing, but I still want to have a camera in my life. I still want to have a photograph, and I still want to be inspired by an image, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
The one that I'm building, I love because it's just that dynamic range, and just it reminds me of a time.
Yeah, and
I want
think
to say something there, Robert.
No, I was just going to say, I think you're really touching on what I think is actually Micro Four Thirds' biggest strength is it kind of makes photography fun again and very approachable. Like you don't have to get intimidated by, you know, the big lenses and the specialized lenses like in macro or the big ones like for wildlife. You can just go out with a little, you know, what's that, the 100 with a 20mm and get fantastic images, and it'll do everything that you want it to. And it doesn't get in the way of you enjoying your time, either in the field, like just doing your touristy photos, or if you want to get a little more serious, you know, you can get these other lenses for it. But Micro Four Thirds has always been about going out and enjoying photography, you know, whether it's, you know, just touristy stuff, street photography, and and not having to carry a lot of gear to get a camera that'll do everything you need it to do with no fuss, really. And
But also, if you look, just what we've got here, we've got 3 distinct different photographers, 4 including yourself. You've had the shoot last week. Some of those people, you know, you look at what they do, they are distinct from each other. This one format, and I think this is the beauty of Micro Four Thirds over the other formats. You know, goodness, I used to shoot large format film. So, you know, you've got limitation. It's beautiful. The results of it are incredible. The results are beautiful, and nobody can tell me that when you've got a good sort of Hasselblad or something like that, you're going to get poor photographs. If you take them properly, you'll get great ones, and it will outdo anything that Micro Four Thirds can do insofar as overall quality in its niche. One of the things I really love about Micro Four Thirds, which the other formats I don't believe can do, I think it's a sweet spot between being not quite that super bokeh king, but you can do that. But you know, the likes of the Ansel Adams of the world, they didn't want shallow depth of field. So you've got this thing which it's not quite at the extremes, but it does the general thing. We've got all these different types and styles of photographers using exactly the same gear. You know, when talking about things, I've got you know, Chris mentioned an OM2 before. Well, that's basically just a continuation of the EM1 Mark I that I had from 2012, I think it was, or 13.
right.
It's that lineage, and it's still using basically the same format. It's a format which fits everybody that you've had on to the point where they can be incredible photographers, but also it can also, because of its lack of limitations, get some old guy who's retired who just wants to pot around and take some enjoyable photographs to his memories. Or it can also be there for the student who's getting into photography for the first time and just wanting to find out about this magical world that they're seeing and how to get around that technical thing. It's so simple, yet it's so incredibly technical at the same time. And it really is a jack of all trades and master of all. And I think that's why Micro Four Thirds for me is so important. I've deliberated so many times about changing back to a different format, and I can't convince myself to.
Yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, I shoot all different formats for different reasons, but Micro Four Thirds is really the only system that does it all. I think you did a really good example of that first image you showed, and what really got you serious about Micro Four Thirds is the portability to be able to get that shot that you wouldn't be able to do with another camera. And just like Lee, his conversion to Micro Four Thirds was, you know, the lenses, right? And going out there with a much smaller, more compact system, but extremely capable, if not much more capable in many ways to other camera systems. And that still holds up today. And I think you and I are more on the same page about just, you know, because I love taking out my little OM3 with a 12 to 45 everywhere. You know, that's kind of my go-to everyday camera now. And it's because it can do everything that I want it to do, no matter what I run into. Because like Lee had mentioned earlier.
The other advantage for me, of course, because I'm not pushing the camera to the limits. The other advantage for me, of course, since I'm not pushing the camera to the limits, I take something like an old GX8. I love the GX8. It's almost a cult camera for me now. So you can take something like that out and still enjoy the photography, and it's still the same sort of camera as these guys are shooting some amazing images on. And I think for me, that's a real plus point in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love about it, is the versatility and the overall. It's really a very straightforward camera system without limitations and very, very few compromises. So yeah, that was a great conversation with all of you. And I wanted to maybe touch back a little bit on some more photography and look at some of your images. So I think, Chris, you haven't showed a single image yet, have you? Unless you did while I was away for 2 minutes.
I didn't, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah, let's see a couple images that you've done that will illustrate, and if you could share some of your thoughts about each image as well.
Sure. So I knew Lee was going to be here today, so I got a few that we made together. So he'll probably recognize some. Just let me know when you can see my screen. Hopefully it's up there. Perfect. So this was when Lee and I were together in Panama a little over a year ago. And this was made at night. If you haven't shot macro at night, I highly, highly encourage you to do so. We were with a group who apparently we were the first group to actually brave the night like we did. I went out every single night that we were there. I think we were there for 7 nights maybe. And I was there every single night after dark out as long as I could, until I was too tired or too wet to continue. Then I go back to sleep. But a lot of things come out at night that aren't out during the day. So if you're just shooting macro midday, not only are the subjects going to be more active because it's warmest midday, the light is going to be the most harsh. You're literally not going to see a lot of the subjects that you would see when the sun is down. So tree frogs, you're really only going to find at nighttime. And this shot was actually not made with a macro lens. This was made with the 8-25. And I shoot with the 8-25 for this kind of wide angle close-up photography, but I shoot the exact same way with a flash with a diffuser from as close as I can get. But I'm not getting the high magnification, but you get that kind of pushed in look with more context around the subject. So the first two images I'll show are actually with
the I'm
8-25
sorry, just before we go to the next image, when you talk about shooting at night, our cameras some have night vision, some have SOVF, some have both.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it.
If you could talk about, do you use those when you're shooting in low light like this at night, or?
Yeah, I actually use SOVF all the time. And the reason why I use SOVF all the time, and I say all the time when I'm using flash, is because if you don't, since the flash hasn't fired yet, your electronic viewfinder or your live view screen are going to try to represent the exposure, but they're representing the exposure for the scene before the flash fires, right? With no flash.
Right.
And it's going to be incredibly underexposed, and it's going to be really hard for you to see. So SOVF, which is the simulated optical viewfinder, that's going to brighten your field of view. It's going to let you see what you're composing. It's going to let you see your subject. It is not representing the output. So that takes a little getting used to for people, because if you're used to that, what you see is what you get, preview of your shot before you take it. That's not what's going to happen. Your flash is going to be added into the situation, and it's going to expose your shot. But I use SOVF for that. Alternatively, we have night vision in our cameras, or at least the newer cameras, OM1, OM1 Mark II, and others released in that time. I find that night vision is really best for true darkness, and I find that SOVF is totally fine even at night. So night vision, from what I can tell, and maybe someone who knows the technical details, or if Dax is on here, I'm sure he could answer this. It seems to reduce the refresh rate to really pull in more light. And in daylight, I don't like that. It makes my viewfinder look like it's not really working properly. Mm-hmm. So I use SOVF, but SOVF all the time, and I'll use a little modeling light, on my diffuser underneath my flash, and that's how I shoot all the time, whether it's day or night.
Yeah, and that's true of most flash photography, whether it's macro or not. I like to turn on SOVF or night vision, but that's a good point about night vision. It can slow the frame rate down of the sensor to a point to where it might be difficult to frame the shot because everything's blurry, motion blur.
Yeah, it doesn't look great. So at least that's what it was on OM1. I don't know if OM1 Mark II is maybe a little better, but I never even tried it because I was so used to using SOVF.
Yeah, and the SOVF is less prone to that. It doesn't try to slow down the frame rate as much, but still give you enough that you can see what's going on without motion blur. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead and let's go through your images here. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I know Lee knows this one. So Lee spotted this scene. So the branch that these two frogs are on was kind of out over this little pond, and it was just the two of us. We were out in the dark. All the clients had gone to bed, and Lisa, tree frogs and amplexus, tree frogs and amplexus, right? He's screaming at me across the pond, and I kind of run over, and I had the 8-25 on my camera, and Lee might have had a 90 on his camera, I forget, but the branch was out over the pond. So we very gently kind of pulled on the branch to not disturb the frogs and got a little closer to the edge so we didn't fall into the pond, which had a caiman sleeping in it as well. And we got it closer to the edge and, you know, balanced myself on the muddy bank of the pond so I didn't fall in, and was able to get this shot. And I approached this from the side because of the depth of field situation. Now, I could have photographed from the front, which would have been easier from a balance perspective, but I wanted both the male and female frogs to be in focus, and I knew I only had so much depth of field to work with. So working across their bodies rather than from nose to tail, that's a shorter distance, right? So I could shoot at an aperture that's going to give me that in a single shot. I don't have to worry about focus stacking. I was very unstable, you know, it was slippery and I was in an uncomfortable position. So shooting in profile like this let me get more of my subject in that focal plane. And, you know, as you can see, everything looks pretty sharp. Yeah. So, and that's with the 8-25. Again, I pushed in really close for that. If I wanted to get a detail shot of one of the frog's eyes or just part of the situation, of course, I could have used macro lens. And then speaking of, this is not a tree frog, but this is a different type of frog. I think it's a Valiance frog. This is with the 90 macro. So now you get that real detail shot, super close up of the frog's eye. And I actually really like the way that the reflection of the diffuser looks in shots like this. And you get something similar in spider's eyes. I'll show a spider in a second, where sometimes people will ask me, oh, how about ring lights? You ever try a ring light or ring flash? And this is one of the reasons why I don't, because you get a really beady looking eye looking back at you when you have that ring light. Some people might like that, or they might do it for effect, but I feel like this kind of humanizes subjects a little bit more, and it puts that dot right in the center.
Yeah.
Kind of like a second pupil. And then
and you know, and the diffuse light coming from more from the top is also more natural looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus, you know, versus a ring light, which kind of surrounds the lighting.
Is everything. Yeah. Yep. A couple mantises real quick. So here's a close-up of a mantis. This one was in pretty rough shape. It had been raining. You know, looks like he's been through war. I just really like the kind of story that you can apply to this. This was focus stacked. So mantises are great for single shots or focus stacking because their face is really flat. So if you can get your sensor parallel to the plane of the mantis's face, even though it's a pretty large insect, you can get a lot in focus if you're parallel. So here I'm almost parallel. Like the bottom tip of that triangle is a little closer than the top of the head. So I did use a few shots to get everything in focus, but you don't need a ton, and you still get that soft background, as opposed to the next shot, which is a single shot. So I'm a little bit further away. And remember, especially with macro, it comes into play that the distance from your subject also impacts your depth of field. As you get closer to your subject, depth of field disappears. And that's an important concept in any type of photography. But with macro, when you're working at those really, really minimal focusing distances, depth of field is going to be minimal as well. So sometimes if you're not getting enough depth of field, it might behoove you to just inch back a little bit, and then you're automatically going to gain some depth of field. So that's what I did here. I didn't need just the mantis's face. I wanted to show that entire forelimb like that. It looks like a sword coming across. I want to get all of that in the shot. And still a pretty soft background, but I got enough in focus.
Yeah, and really beautiful lighting in the background too.
Thank you. Two more. Lee will recognize this one as well. We spent quite a bit of time with this vine snake. What's really cool about this subject, I think anyone who's commented on this or I've talked to about this shot says, oh my God, what timing. You got it right as it was striking at you. And that is not what's happening at all. The vine snakes will actually stay in this position with their mouth gaping as a defensive posture. So they're just kind of swaying back and forth with the mouth open. But I probably, kind of like Lee said, with the bird coming down to eat the afterbirth, I probably threw away 50 shots that, you might say, oh, that was a good one. That was a good one. But I was trying to get the body of the snake in just that position where it kind of est back and forth, where part of the body was coming from inside that open mouth and then the rest was going off into space. And then, everything just in the right position with the snake's face in focus, just the way I wanted. So
perfect.
Didn't happen. Thank you. It didn't happen by accident by any means, but also didn't happen on the first try. But again, nobody says, oh, how many tries did it take you? Nobody cares. They care about the shot that you got.
Yeah.
And then last, this is probably a little bit more typical of what I shoot most often. This is shot here at my home. This is a tiny little bull jumping spider on a pine cone. And this shot is not cropped at all. So this is kind of what you can expect if you get close to that minimum working distance with the 90. Very, very small spiders. That's a pine cone. So the pine cone gives a little bit of scale of how small that spider is.
Yeah.
But focus stacked shot. So focus bracketed and then stacked with helical focus to get this result.
Nice. And you introduced me to jumping spiders last year or the year before.
Yep.
I didn't know they were the most common spider species out there. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
I find them all the time now in my backyard. I'm like,
well, yeah. And I remember you telling me, but when we had that first conversation, probably a year and a half ago, you said, I've never seen one. Where do you find them? I said, Rob, they're everywhere. You just got to look. And then once you start seeing them, they really are. And there are several species, basically anywhere on the planet, you'll find them. So
yeah, it's
really
amazing.
Cool, really cute.
I think they make up like a third of all the spiders on the planet, something like that. I was like, wow. Anyhow, that's the great thing about photography, is that curiosity and things that you learn along the way. So thanks so much for sharing those and the general techniques, and also you demonstrated your knowledge of the field or the kinds of insects, like the focal plane of the head of the praying mantis being flat, and working with the focal plane of the frog, going from the side rather than straight on. These are all techniques that you pick up, either in a workshop, but, just going out and practicing. There's so many things that go into the shot that are not related to the camera, right, and the gear that you're using, but more to your technique. And you demonstrate a lot of that here as well. So going to that, I wanted to get Lee, because you only showed us one shot, and I know you have so many amazing pictures. If you could just share a few more with us and give us a little story or techniques that you used.
Absolutely. Be happy to do that, bud. I'll first, because I know there's still skeptics probably sitting out there related to, and hopefully it'll pop up here in a minute. I did share my screen. There we go. So because there's skeptics, I want to prove. So I'm at 500 millimeters, 1/40th a second at ISO 25,600. And this is before the sun even came up. The importance of exposing to the right. So look at all the detail. Okay. That is ISO 25,600. And then just to prove even more, that is significantly cropped. So when people say, well, you can't do that with Micro Four Thirds, I love to respond with, well, you might not be able to, but I can nail it. And if you learn how to do it, anybody can nail it, right? But they've never tried because they listen to some goofball on YouTube who tells them they can't and who's never tried it, right? So again, I like to push things to the extreme. I haven't had a lot of chances to try higher ISOs. I plan to when I stop creating mentorship programs and working and going on workshops. But that's just to show you what you can do. Now, what I would tell y'all over the last few years, I am making the transition over the last several years from field guide photography to fine art wildlife photographer. So, I mean, this is a pretty shot, nice colors, frontal lighting, the full body, blah, 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 blah. Man, I have seen so many thousands of shots like this anymore. It's a beautiful shot, beautiful bird, ruddy turnstone. I'm kind of over it. I see so many shots from Costa Rica taken in blinds. I can tell you what lodge and what perch that bird was shot on. And I'm kind of bored with. I get bored easy, man. I'm OCD, ADHD, and so believe it or not, the only classes I've bought over the last few years are portrait photographers. Why? I'm not a portrait photographer. I don't really like shooting people, although Easy's beautiful, so I'll probably try to take more pictures of her. But the reality is, I wanted to become a fine art photographer, and I wanted to see how portrait photographers who can control all their lighting, what do they do so I can look for that in nature, right? So this is one of my favorite shots of 2025 in terms of just a simple, nice black and white. I'd put this on my wall. But what I noticed, it was harsh daylight. But look at the light on the left side of the face of the jaguar, okay? So I had a giant diffuser called the tributary of the river that the sun was reflecting off the water. And I saw this and I tried to tell my clients, man, look at this, this is gorgeous. This beautiful light wrapping around this jaguar, that intense. I knew, and I shoot a lot of black and white wildlife, and I know it's going to be black and white when I pull the trigger, okay? So, for example, here I had a private client, actually a Hollywood actor, hired me, much to my chagrin, my surprise, because I'm not a celebrity guy, but he was actually really down to earth. And we had very overcast day out in the Puget Sound region, and this loon comes by, and I go, "Oh, dude, just shoot, just shoot." Well, in color, this sucks. It's flat, it's boring, and I knew in black and white, that's a wall hanger. That is gorgeous loon shot. And honestly, the fact it's starting to molt to basic plumage, get this little speckling on the face, helps it stand out even more. Okay. So I looked for the image that had the most reflection coming towards me, because in black and white, I love this image. Okay. So when I was in Galapagos, I'll be going to my 8th trip coming up. Well, you start seeing the same shots over and over, the same birds. Well, what can I do? Well, last year I said, how can I portray the intimate aspects of birds? Well, I focused on preening last year. And once you can make the shift away from field guide photographer, where you believe you always need front lighting and have to see the entire animal, you start looking at different things. So here, while this red-footed booby of the brown phase, a brown morph, was preening, look at how the light came in. So it's wing, the scapulars and the secondaries here and the back feathers, they form this beautiful V, and giving you this framing of this gorgeous light, the beautiful eye, the beautiful color on the bill. So here, this is the kind of stuff I'm pursuing much more now. In India, why do I use SH2, Rob? Guess what? This tiger started out back here in more shadow. I knew the shot as soon as I wanted. I shot vertical. I knew that I wanted it in partial light, but I wanted the left paw forward. I did not, if the tail weren't showing, this shot would not be shown here, because the visual balance would not be as good, I wouldn't think. And how many shots did I have? This tiger, this is a massive, oh my God, he was huge. He walked right in front of the Jeep. His status, oh my God, that was awesome. But look at the light. See how there's only a little bit of dapple light can be beautiful. I mean, it can be brutal, but it can be spectacular. But guess what? I had to have just the right moment when the eye was in the light, the rest of the body in shadow, a little light on the legs, the tail. Love it, man. Love that. Another thing about I love birds in flight, but I love creative lighting with birds. So I learned this technique more from portrait photographers and a lot of wildlife photographers. Guess what? Guess how many of my clients, this is in Panama. Chris, you were with me. Yeah. Guess how many of the clients stood up to try this? None. They were shooting with the frontal light, said, "Oh, that's pretty. This isn't pretty." And then they saw my light and they're like, yeah, this is what I call emerging light. When a subject is flying out of shadow into bright sun, especially backlit with live highlights. Guess how easy that is? With live highlights, guess how brutal that is? Also, I saw someone mention earlier they use auto ISO. Auto ISO is probably one of the top 2 worst features ever invented on a camera. I know you're going to say, well, it works okay for me. Well, you don't pay me a lot of money to teach you okay. You pay me a lot of money to teach you how to nail it. Auto ISO, and I can prove it. Just trust me, I'll prove it. Auto ISO is brutally terrible, especially birds in flight. It will never work. Auto ISO would screw this picture over every single time.
Yeah.
Okay. So just understand, you can argue with me. I'll prove it to you. Let's go out, just stand next to me in the field, and I will show you why auto ISO is horrific. Auto ISO, it's a crutch, and unfortunately, it breaks on you every time, and you fall flat on your face. Okay. So this shot is the kind of light I'm looking for, like this, backlit. Live highlight alerts saves these kind of images, right? Live highlight alerts. And so here I can meter off a pelican's head, but notice it's slightly backlit. Front lighting on this illuminates this entire background. There's not as much contrast with a dull colored brown pelican. Here, the water droplets show up. Front lighting, they don't show up, right? Here in Brazil, if you saw the raw file of this, let me show you the importance of mastering post-processing, okay? Let me pop over and go to, let me go to the file here. And I knew what this was going to be. I knew what this image was going to be when I took it. So here's a raw file. There's the post-process color. This is boring. But I knew I had to. Why does this look so harsh? Because I had to expose the right. This was a male jaguar under a tree. He had sniffed a female that had just been there a couple of minutes before. Okay. And if I had not exposed the right, there wouldn't be detail on this jaguar. How many jaguar pictures you see of them looking straight up? You don't see many, do you? So here, by exposing the right and getting, I mean, look at these branches. Look at the noise. ISO 6400. Look at that noise. Look at this picture. Put that crap on my wall.
Yeah.
Right? So I try to encourage people, quit chimping you need to chimp when you're using a flash. Okay. You need to chimp when using a flash. You need to chimp for night sky image. If you learn the technique I teach for exposure, you do not need to chimp for wildlife photography. You don't need to chimp because nobody's ever captured a great image looking at the back of their camera. Okay. I also like to set up for iconic shots where, like here in the Galapagos, this is Kicker Rock in the background and the blue-footed boobies were diving and fishing in front of it. So yeah, this is overcast light somewhat, a little bit of reflective light. And I love, the colors are a bit muted in the background, but I have this beautiful, iconic spot going on. Again, silhouettes, snail kites hunting at dawn. Don't need to, when you're a bird watcher, if you're coming into photography from bird watcher, you never think of these shots because you want to see all the details on the bird. So the more you can get away from needing to see all the details on the bird, and also move away from always having to have a tight shot. I tend to shoot tight a lot, but here in the Faroe Islands, I love the shot of a northern fulmar with the waves and the rocks in the background. I don't want pure bokeh on here. I want to show people the environment this bird is flying in.
Yeah,
so
I love the framing of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great geometry going on in there.
Let me encourage people, don't always get stuck in the trap of thinking you have to show the whole animal. I've really been kind of breaking down genres of wildlife photography lately and to try to get as detailed as possible and which ones require a different custom mode on your camera, right? So standard wildlife portrait, you got a tight shot of a head or whatever. Field guide photography, which some people want to shoot that a lot. That's fine, right? But I got super portraits where I'm showing partial face, where I have a lion licking cartilage off a bone and it's just the tongue, the cartilage, and the bone.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I start thinking about, okay, then there's birds in flight, right? You can get into, I'm trying to think about, okay, in panning, well, that should be a different custom mode from your standard wildlife mode. Mm-hmm. General wildlife mode, custom mode, wildlife environmental, because you have a longer, a wider lens, that needs a different one. Panning, that could be a different custom mode on a wildlife body. So I'm up to about 10 or 12 different genres of wildlife photography now, where I'm thinking, how specific can we be in programming our custom modes so that we're very intent with our settings? Because to Brian's point earlier, are people learning? About 5 years ago, I just noticed I had clients spending crap loads of money on gear, crap loads of money on travel, and not getting many good shots. They're out in the field fiddle farting around with their camera because they haven't mastered their system. So I started really thinking about everything that goes into what I call a visually compelling image. And I finally broke it down into 3 categories: master your system, master your field craft, and master your post-processing, right? All 3 of those are critically equal. Field craft is one of the most important, least talked about. So then I said, well, how have I learned the best in life? Well, my mentors. And I'm not just talking about photography. I'm talking about leadership, organizational leadership, personality assessments, all kinds of things I've done in life. How did I learn best? So then I created a mentorship program. Like right now I have Master Your System, Master Your Photography. That's the OM1, the OM1 Mark II, and the OM3. Right. I have Master Your Fieldcraft workshop. So photographing landscapes and wildlife in winter is very different than photographing in dry and dusty conditions in India from a safari vehicle. And it's very different than photographing from a boat or a little skiff on the Amazon versus photographing from a larger boat that someone might do on a cruise, right? So I started coming up, okay, what is all the fieldcraft elements that go into that? And then post-processing, judging camera contests, so many images, 80% of images I would see, I'd be like, man, if they, several times there could have been a winner had they known how to post-process correctly.
Yeah.
Several times I thought that would have been the winning shot, but it's not as good as this one because this person knew post-processing. So,
right.
So that's why I'm always thinking about settings and wanting people to be able to progress into mastering their gear. For wildlife photographers, and again, I do landscape and night sky. If you have more than one camera system and you're trying to do wildlife, you are setting yourself up for failure. Because you can't master 4 systems. Okay, you can't master night sky. I've done a lightning bolt with 3 systems on tripods using remotes. I've got the same lightning bolt shot with 3 systems. Yeah, you can do something like that, but I'll tell you, wildlife photographers, I've had people say, well, I have a micro 4/3 for this, and it's you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Right. Yeah, mastering your system, and it means really focusing on one, whatever that may be. But I like you said, like Brian said, micro 4/3, we can go into any particular area, and if you master the system, you can really get so much out of it. And I think, I thought that was an interesting point you made early on about when you're showing your photos about going into, learning about portrait photography and lighting and trying to find that same lighting in nature. Like that first one of the leopard that had sort of the chiaroscuro type lighting, where it's, dark light, beautiful. And, and then the framing with the environment, with that last one with whatever seagull looking bird, and framing the geometry of the rocks and the waterfalls behind it. There's a lot that goes into the photography after you master your system, and post-processing. It's really, when you're in the field, being able to see those things when they become available, and taking advantage of the camera system to capture that. Lots of great techniques from all of you. My goodness. So much to learn. Certainly a lot of things I need to rethink about how I, use my camera in the field.
Hey, Rob, I know we're already at 2 hours and everybody's probably getting tired of us. I just want to point one thing out about what Lee said a minute ago. He had the photo of the red-billed tropic bird, and he said, I'm the only one who thought to take the shot this way, right? There are clients there, and that they all are taking the shots different ways. And if anyone listening to this now has never been in the field with an instructor, right? Gone on a workshop, shot with one. I think that's one of the biggest advantages of shooting with someone who knows what they're doing, whatever genre you're into. If you're shooting red-billed tropic birds in flight with Lee, and you look over his shoulder and you see that shot and you think, son of a, I never would have thought to take that shot. You could go on that same trip with Lee and you would never think to take that shot. Or if you're in the field, with me or with any other ambassador, workshop leader, or whatever, you get that advantage of not just hearing the technical things. We can tell you the settings, we can tell you the approach, but when you can see it happening in real time, I think that there's a big benefit to be had. So, whoever you follow and admire, and if they offer workshops in your area of interest, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that, I know Lee, because you and Lee are doing still working professionally, do offer workshops and mentoring. So when after the stream, I'll put the links down below to those things. I've been to ones with Chris and other ambassadors, and they're amazing. And I learned a lot at those workshops, because I tend to get too technical sometimes and think about the gear and trying to use those crutches like auto ISO, because it's in the camera, why not use it? And you guys are showing us that, and like what Brian was saying, you don't have to get so technical and into the weeds and all this advanced technologies. A lot of it comes back down to using the basic skill sets and developing those skill sets and developing an eye to really take better pictures, and not worrying about what the system can't do, but what it can do. And gosh, there's one other thing, but yeah, you guys are making a lot of great points, and I know we're running over 2 hours, and I didn't want to take up more of your time, but the one other segment I wanted to do, if you have time, is I wanted to turn it around a little bit and have you ask questions, possibly of one or all of us, in that same vein. So since you're up, Chris, did you want to ask any of us? Or
sure. And it's a perfect segue, Rob, because I just saw a question come in, or a comment in the chat, which is exactly kind of the topic that I was going to ask the three of you about. So the comment says, I'd love to see OM System bring out an OM3 monochrome, seriously interested in a dedicated black and white camera. So my question isn't about monochrome necessarily, but about what single feature, either via firmware or hardware upgrade, would you like to see introduced into the Micro Four Thirds ecosystem?
Is this for all
Rob,
of
you
us?
can go first.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to hear everyone's. Yeah. And in the comments too, let us know in the chat on the side there.
I would love to see the ability to combine computational features like high-res shot mode together with focus stacking or bracketing. That would be a really amazing thing to do, because we have to pick one. If we want to do high-res stacking, we have to do it manually, So I'd love to see combinations of things get put together. Maybe combine like the grad and deep filter with high-res shot mode, things like that, to make it even more powerful. Because I lean heavily into the computational features sometimes, and I don't think just because the camera has it, you should feel obligated to try to use these things. Going back to like what Brian's approach of just keeping it simple and using the camera so it can, and because it can deliver on any front. But I lean heavily into and that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. How about you, Brian?
I think for me, most of the photographic things have been done. It's really interesting to listen to you guys talk, because you are of a different genre to me. And, these cameras have got all sorts in, but I equate them to, if you're using a word processor, when you first start using word processors, you want to write a letter. There's all sorts of things for doing envelopes and mail merges, and some of us will never use it. And I think the cameras we have are at that sort of stage. So some of the things you're talking about, I just will not use. I don't have a need. But I think also we've almost come to the end of what is worthwhile developing for this. It's really an unbelievable peak, which even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly, we wouldn't have got. So my biggest problem now isn't taking the photographs, isn't using the technology. I did a little bit of macro photography a while ago just as a try, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really could understand why it worked that way. I've tried doing some some wildlife photography. I am atrocious at it, but at least some of the things on there that Lee's been talking about, I can understand getting into. The one thing I really think struggles on almost all cameras, but certainly the Micro Four Thirds, is getting the images either still or video, because we haven't mentioned video at all tonight, but getting those images off easily in a manner which is nice and usable without having to go through, go into a techie mode. And I mean, for my webcam at the moment, I'm using a Pocket Pro 3, a DJI Pocket Pro 3. I love it. Video-wise, I have a Bluetooth microphone, switch it on, it works. My software works to get the videos or the pictures off. Everything seems to work. Yet I still see from all the major camera manufacturers, but certainly from the big two in the Micro Four Thirds, it still seems to be a little bit of a mountain. It works sometimes well, but otherwise it's not so good. And I just think the connectivity to other systems so that you can bring those photographs off or those videos off in an easy, quick manner, it seems to have been left behind compared to the rest of the technical world. So that would be my thing that I'd be looking for.
Yeah. So I'll answer my own question after Lee answers, but it's kind of in the same vein of what you just said, Brian. But go ahead, Lee. What would you like to see? You probably have a long list. Number one. A couple
of things that I think that I would love to see. I mentioned the drive mode thing earlier. I want a non-linear graduated neutral density filter. I think that is doable. It's just a matter of mathematics and processing speed. But I do think there are several things more that can come into cameras. For example, eventually an AI chip that will identify for wildlife, macro subjects, maybe even for landscape, that will identify where you're at or what you're shooting and go ahead and create a caption for you in your raw file. Now that's a tremendous amount of processing speed, but again, I'm not limiting myself to what is. I'm thinking what can be. Okay, that would be amazing and save a tremendous amount of time post capture. I saw someone mention bring back the tilt screen. If they did, I wouldn't buy it. That's someone who's never shot jaguars out of a boat. How in the world would you hold the lens? This is why that means you're not shooting many vertical shots, okay? And I know I'm picking on you a little bit, and that's okay. I pick on everybody, including myself. My God, look at me, okay? So that means you've never held a camera like this and tried to shoot a jaguar at eye level in the water, right? So the tilt-only screen is one of the worst things on the back of a camera. If all you shoot is horizontal and on a tripod, yeah, that might work. But it would be a horrible idea for the more advanced cameras for wildlife. So I see someone wanting more megapixels. You don't need more megapixels. It's not how many you have. It's what you do with them in post-processing and shooting. So you don't need more. Trust me. The Canon 1DX3 was about 20, maybe 18, 19, 20 megapixels. It was $7,000. What, Brian, 10, 12, 15 years ago? Nobody ever said, oh, God, it'd be great if we had 24 megapixels. Nobody ever said that with that Canon. Learn how, you know what? There's art and science to this, and quit worrying about more megapixels. Worry about features that capture great images. I mean, nobody's going to turn away more, but if it means I'd rather have more processing power for other things and room for other things in the camera. But I do think there are some changes that we can make. This is a simple one. Stop calling I use a ton of custom autofocus target modes. That should not be C1 through C4 when you have C1, C4 custom modes on the camera. This is where they won't let me talk to the Japanese engineers. Y'all can figure out why. But this is where engineers who aren't photographers mess up. This is where it would be really nice to have a photographer in there. Guys, we don't need multiple copies of C1, C2, C3, C4. So I really think that there are some things we can make. I mean, I absolutely love OM system. I'm passionate, but I mean, you're talking about the nerd that can tell you where to go in the menu off the top of his head to turn on live highlights for the electronic viewfinder in the screen, right? Or can tell you what page and what item. And there are some things that I think it'd be great if only to minimize some transitions in things, because I'm all about speed and then accuracy. My philosophy is speed first, then accuracy. So I think that we have some things that will be possible in the future with technology. But I also will say, I think Brian's point, technology is going to come out and then flatten, and it's going to be subtle differences. And there may be a couple of big ones, but, I tell you what, how about a freaking HDMI plug and somebody make HDMI cables that aren't crap? There we go.
Oh, yes.
HDMI cable and plug that isn't crap. And that's not just OM system. That is micro HDMI. I would like to whip the engineers who design those cables with their cables. There we go. How about that one?
Yeah, that's a good one. A lot of those broken connectors over the years.
Oh, God, that's so annoying.
So I'll just say two real quick. Lee, you mentioned, additional leveraging of AI in the future, which I think is definitely a direction where things are going. And OM system tends to be a little bit on the forefront and experimental with those things. So I think that they might be a candidate to jump in on that. But I'd love to see, with the EM1X, that was really the first AI subject detection that we saw. And if we could get automatic subject detection. So if I point the camera at a cat, don't make me choose cats and dogs or mammals, just know that it's a cat. Let me override it, but if there could be some automation to that, that would be great. And actually piggybacking off of something Brian said with the files, not necessarily the transfer of files from camera to computer, but the file naming. I know a lot of people have brought this up over the years, and I, as someone who uses focus bracketing, focus stacking, and others that use high res or multiple exposures or other things, just giving them better file structure and naming when you import them. Because if I am going from a 30-shot bracketed series to a 10-shot bracketed series to a 20-shot bracketed series in sequence, it can be time-consuming and a hassle to identify which shots belong to which sequence. Just give them a different file name, add a suffix or a prefix, put them in a folder. There are a number of ways to do this, but a little bit of extra file naming, file structuring would be really welcome.
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you I've run into problems where I like to rename my files to be I'll change the first three letters to the camera name. So OM3, OM1. So it's easy to spot, which camera I used just by the file name. But I run into, like I said, I'll come home with 8,000 images, but then when I go to the next 8,000, the numbers overlap.
Oh, yeah.
Because the counter. And you could do that with focus bracketing and stacking just as easy, because you're probably doing 40, 100 shots sometimes. And I think Lee also, that's a really interesting idea about having the camera recognize what you took a picture of and adding a caption. I bet the first iteration of that is not too far off, because just like what we do with geotagging, where we have a Bluetooth connection to our phone, why couldn't we have a Bluetooth connection that sends the image over to an image recognition thing on our phone and come back and label the image,
That connection does take a lot of battery power. So for wildlife photographers, and then remember, many of the places we're photographing, unless it's a built-in database, you don't have service. I personally despise connecting to my phone. That is one thing I hate. I'll tell you what else I hate: our friggin' firmware update. That's where engineers ought to be caned for a good 15 seconds. There's no excuse to not be able to put it on an SD card. It's just a horrible problem. And OM Workspace is built for PCs, not Mac. I could go on that too. But I will say that the phone connection for me is brutal. I don't like it. I hate it. I live in areas where I don't have, it's not a good solution for a lot of things. So I know a lot of people like it and use it for other things, but for most of my work, I don't find it very helpful.
Right.
What would be helpful is like Chris, doing we do focus stacking. HD, if you take an HDR series, it'd be awesome for the camera to automatically put a black frame at the front or in back of a series.
Oh my God, yeah.
Put a black frame at the beginning or end of a series. And I've been talking about that for a while. That would be a really great way, because I'll go from, auto HDR, and it'd be nice, or just have a button for a black image, so that, like, because I don't typically switch in auto exposure bracketing. I just change my shutter speed, like if I'm doing landscape. So it'd be great to go click, give me a black frame, boom, 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 black frame. I mean, yes, I take a picture of my hand, but it'd be nice just to have a simple boom, right, done.
Yeah.
And I don't think to do that with focus stacking, because oftentimes moving our hand will spook our subject. And I do focus stacking with venomous snakes. I'm not putting my hand out there for the black shot, you know. So I will say that someone asked a question earlier about the 50 to 200 macro, outstanding, and the 150 to 400 as well. That is my go-to big venomous snake, big dragonflies, dragonflies and damselflies in flight, large butterflies. Those lenses are great for those where it gives you a little more working room to not spook subjects, or you got a big bushmaster and you don't want to be, you know, 7 inches from its face. So those two lenses, I do use them, and I do program custom modes for both those lenses with and without flash. I like field flash with dragonflies, not doing that with them in flight. So that's separate custom modes I program is long lens macro. Sometimes it's not true 1-to-1. Long lens macro with and without flash should be separate custom modes on your cameras, versus macro with a macro lens with flash and macro with a lens, macro lens without flash. That should be programmed differently too.
So, yeah, there's a lot there to take in. I think that, well, let me move on to, since you're up, you know, did you have any questions for any of us as a group or individually?
Yeah, you know, I would say, what is y'all's biggest, like, what is it right now that you go, if I only knew how to do this, or if I only knew how to explain this to people, I would feel a little more confident in something.
Why don't you go, Brian?
Thank you. I was just thinking that's a hard one to answer. The truth of it is, I've been, as I said, I started taking photographs when I was 6 years old. I'm 64 now, and I've had a lot of experience over the years, and my knowledge is still way down to what I like to be. So it's a difficult question to answer, because I look at people like you. You know, I watch your channel a few times. I watch what you do. I can't do what you do, you know, because there's a skill level, there's an eye, and if there's anything I could do, it would be to learn what people like yourself do. But then it wouldn't be me; it would be you. On that, it's learning your own style. But it's being able to carry on for a lot longer in life, to carry on and find out all these little bits and pieces. I talk to people over here. Teaching wise, I don't find it particularly difficult to teach. I teach various subjects anyway. You know, that's what I do from a professional point of view as well in the past. So I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a thing insofar as I look at an awful lot of other people, their work, and just admire it and think, what can I take from that? So there's not one thing I can think of, but it's just being able to appreciate other people's skills and cream off little bits at the top. Just listening to the two of you today, I've learned lots of little things. You know, and it's not big things. Big things, learning big things don't interest me, because it's the little things which you build on like blocks, which then take you to that higher level and they give a foundation. So, you know, if there's anything I'm missing, it's that other 99.9% that I'm missing at the moment.
Wow. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, for me, it's not necessarily something technical, because I feel like, especially being in the lane of macro for so long, if I had technical hurdles over the years, I've pretty much overcome them at this point. But it's the idea of explaining to people why I like macro. You know, I think I've answered that question in a number of ways over the years, but you get people all the time that say, why, you can photograph anything, why do you want to photograph bugs? You know, and they're so far from understanding that no matter what answer I give them, it's not going to bring them into it. So, like, if you look at my photos and you're not interested, and I've given you the best I can give you to tell the story of why you should care, then you're probably just not going to understand it. But if I could figure out, you know, that magic bullet to answer that question in a way that connects with more people, you know, I'd like to have that.
Wow, that's awesome. How about Brian? Did you want to give us a question? to the group or individually?
Yeah, I think, I mean, from me, I've found one of the photographs actually that I've found I have a model release. I might show you before the end of the portrait stuff that I used to take. And for me, that was a skill. That was where my skill came, because I could understand why to use certain lighting. And I keep on looking at the screen instead of the camera, but why to use certain lighting. And as I say, I think what I did, I was very good at. I must have been reasonably good because people kept on paying me to do it. Is there anything, but I long for other things. Is there anything that you long for which is outside your current field? Is there anything you really long for to say, do you know what, I want the challenge of photography in that field? And what do you think about that? Anything or nothing?
Yeah, Brian, I had for most of my career, and I'm like you, I got my first, it was a toy camera. I actually found it on eBay in the box, and it's sitting up there. I bought one, but started about 6 or 7, and I never had interest in people, never really did. But I will tell you, when I first started seeing photojournalistic wedding photography style, like I hate what I call the death lineup at weddings, where everybody's in a line and you don't look at it until somebody dies and you go, oh, there's grandpa. Yep. That's what he looked like when he was breathing. That always bored the crap out of me. And that's what a lot of wedding work was when I got married the first time, and, blah, blah, blah. So I think if I had the time, I've actually bought some gear. I would love to work on portrait photography, because I've done some self-portraits that turned out reasonably well, but there's so much skill. It's other than the camera looks the same, there's almost nothing identical, right? I mean, there might be occasional overlap of settings, but let's face it, it is a completely different world. And I feel like that the more I make myself learn what I don't know in genres of photography, for example, everybody asks me if I watch this YouTube guy for wildlife and landscape. No. Do you know, I don't have much time. I work constantly. But you know what images I do like to look at, Brian? Industrial, portrait, in photojournalistic wedding. You know why? Because I'll go, oh, how can I make an animal look like that? Right? So if I could, I would love to be able to spend some personal time. I've bought some classes, Joel's class, I bought a few classes. I've never bought a wildlife or landscape photographer's class. That's what I teach. I try to learn from people doing the genres I don't, right? Portrait, industrial, that kind of stuff, the photojournalistic wedding. Because all you got to do is figure out how to swap an animal for the person. But I would enjoy people photography. I've gotten where I actually enjoy more street, but I don't get to do it enough to where it really sinks in the way I would like it to. But I think that's what I would like to do. I'd love to be like almost an apprentice under a portrait person, where I would end up shooting some portrait, but to be honest, I would continue to take that into the wildlife and even the macro world. Like I need to spend more time in macro. I love it. And when I do it, like when I'm in Panama, I rarely pick up my wildlife lens. I grab my macro, because you know why? You can see this, you see jaguar shots coming out like crazy from Brazil. You see bear shots coming out like crazy from Alaska. You see this and that. But you know what I love about going in the jungle with Chris at night? Yeah, we see red-eyed tree frogs. You're going to see it. But how many things do we see that we may never even see again, even if we go back to the same spot? You can't pick another genre of nature photography where that happens, where you go, well, guys, you're probably never going to see that beetle again in the rest of your life. That was your photographic opportunity, and it is done. So I think for me, that's what I'd like to do. I'd love to be able to have the time. I do when I have time. I'll try to look at those things, but and I will say
something into that.
Yeah, please.
So as you were talking about the portrait photography, which is something I do, I don't even think it's just about photography. The way that I approach portraits is more about communicating with people. And the way I also think about wildlife photography is you could have an understanding of that wildlife. You've got to get a communication with them, which is diverse. And that's nothing to do with photography. That's just how you can actually communicate to get the photograph done. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, you know what I love? One of the areas that I growing up hunting, and I know not many people do, and again, if people have a ethical issue with it, I really don't care. I love to bite into things that bleed. So I don't apologize for that. But I will tell you, learning the field craft as a hunter made me a much better photographer. And I am, this is going to sound crazy. I've been a church planter. I did transportation planning. I've had quite a varied career. And I am just, my personality, I am very wired in to, and because of things that happened when I grew up, into subtle facial and body posture, trying to read what somebody was feeling. And I can do that with animals on it. So I notice little things where an animal's telling me that's close enough. So I know I either got to lay down and crawl now, or I need to move position, or I'm good at anticipating quickly. So I can tell the angle an animal's walking and quickly look and judge that's going to be a better picture than where we see it right now. And that's the field craft that people don't talk about. Most wildlife photographers go, subject, and they start walking right at it and then photograph it. They don't think, okay, it's walking this way. So you're right. Learning to read an individual, humans, I just say, hey man, try to do this. I'm not good at it with portrait photography because I haven't done much of it. But with animals, I'm awesome with it. I can read their body language. Oh, they're nervous. And I don't want a picture. I talk about when you're culling images, someone asked about culling images. Do you remember, Brian, I think all of us, Chris might be too young. Do y'all all remember the Prudential elk? You remember the ads for Prudential Insurance and the elk walk?
No, I'm British.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true. You don't have Prudential Insurance, so that's true. So it's a very regal pose, right? Mm-hmm. So if you take a series of shots of a coyote walking, when the back leg is forward and the front leg is back, his shoulder and head position is going to be more regal. When the front leg is more forward and his head drops down, that's going to be the wily coyote. So what do you want your image to say? So you got to learn to also, when you're culling, what do you want? You don't want a bird that looks like, oh my God, he's going to kill and eat me usually, right? So yeah, I think there are a lot of relationships, but doing it with humans and doing it with wildlife are very different in terms of what you need to know. But you're right, there's a lot of overlap in that you do need to know it. Yeah, that was a cool point, Brian.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I think everyone got a chance, right, to ask a question for the group. And I think this is a good time to maybe wrap things up with some final thoughts from everyone. So I'll go back to Chris there. Any last thoughts for our audience that you'd like to share?
Well, first, just, thanks, Rob, for having us on. I think it was great. Of course, we say, we won't go too long, and here we are, 2.5 hours, but it goes fast, and we have a lot to say. But I'll say for anyone that's kind of stuck around to this point, obviously you enjoy listening to people talk about photography. I assume you like shooting yourself, but getting out into the field and practicing, or even if it's indoors, just practicing in general, is the most valuable thing. You can go to presentations, you can go sit in classes, you can watch videos until your camera or your laptop battery dies or your phone battery dies, right? Like you can just watch and listen. But getting out there and trying and practicing and trying to apply the knowledge that you've learned here, whether it's by yourself or with an instructor out in the field, I think that's the most valuable. So that's just my bit of advice. Obviously, we're talking to you in this forum today, and we're glad that you're here with us. But I really wholeheartedly feel that the most valuable time you can spend with your camera is with it in your hand and out in the field.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. How about you, Lee?
I just want people to spend time mastering their system when they can, so that when they get the opportunity for that shot of a lifetime, you're prepared. My formula for nature photography success, I've shared it on your streams before, is preparation plus skill times patience equals luck, right? And if you spend 10 grand to go with me Galapagos Islands or more, and that moment of luck pops up, but you don't have the preparation, of the skill, and you're definitely not being patient, well, it's not going to work out. And I get frustrated. Brian alluded to this earlier. The whole reason my mentorship program came about was I got so frustrated seeing people have the right gear, be in the right place, and not get the shot because they lack that preparation and skill, right? And so the reality is spend time taking lots. It's digital. I mean, Brian, Rob, Chris, and I could all go out today, shoot 10,000 images and delete 9,997 of them at home. Then who cares? So quit Quit worrying about megapixels. Quit worrying about this and that, and worry about mastering your craft, master post-processing, and you will quit worrying about megapixels. You won't give a crap about that. Once you master those things, you'll realize that's not what's important. What's important is my field craft, my post-processing, this and that. So you'll learn how to assess, and you'll have a lot more fun. Because at the end of a lot of this came out because I had a private client for a 30-day trip. She wore me the hell out. Oh my God. And you know what? Halfway through, she had more money than Davy Crockett. She could go anywhere she wanted. And she was a phenomenal photographer. But you know what, Rob? She didn't know how to have fun. Didn't know how to have fun. And I thought, God, isn't that the point of this? Like, master your system, master your field craft, master your post-processing so that it's all fun. If it's not fun, then what's the point? You know, I wish I will. I had my first wife. I will never be in a position to retire and photograph on my own. What I went through in that divorce, right? So I envy Brian because he says, "Man, I'm just going out to have fun now." Oh my God! I hope everybody remembers that at the end of the day, we want to do all these things so that we look at our image and have fun and bring back those memories. You know, it's what Brian said, wasn't it? Well, this is a memory of a place I've been. And so I think that's what I'd say is, man, I would really, really remind y'all, master that stuff. Quit arguing with the morons on Facebook about megapixels. Master your gear, master your post-process, master your and have fun photographing. It'll change your photographic life. I guarantee it. I promise it.
Yeah, great advice for all. Okay, Brian, any last words?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I finish all my videos off, go and have fun, because it doesn't matter what standard you are at, if you can do something. But I think we have a, you know, I was looking, this is the 8th one and that you've done, Rob. I remember watching the first ones come out and think myself, wow, great bunch of photographers. But, you know, be interested to be in their company. And I've been in their company for the last 3 years. And every time I come on here, I find that it's an absolute honor because I learned something. But more than just learn something, I feel that there's a communication. There's 4 different people on here with 4 different styles, each with a common thing of a little plastic and metal box with a bit of glass on it. And it's nothing more than that. In reality, it's nothing more than that. But at the end of the day, we're so lucky we've got this ability to master something, or attempt to master something, should I say, because I'll never master it, but attempt to master something which will do some important things. Can I just show one photograph, Rob? Because I've
Yes, please.
sorted it out very, very quickly. I was on about the bokeh, but this tells what I'm actually wanting to get into, and I'll just put this up. I was trying to find this desperately because this is one which I've actually got an image release of, and it's a cadet which I took a few years ago. I'm not going to leave it on for now, but basically I said about the shallow bokeh, you know, you can see the flag behind. But more importantly than that, this guy is a few years older. I had permission from the parents to use this in the business. That's the sort of thing I used to do to an awful lot of people, cadets and things, and bring it in insofar as that. I know that photograph is probably on that guy's grandmother's sideboards or whatever. On the mother's sideboard, I used to do a multi sort of photograph for him. He's got that. To me, I'm taking a snapshot of a story, whether it's a story in that person's life and bring their memory back. It's a huge responsibility, in my opinion. But when he's my age, if he's still got the photograph, then he's got something of his youth. His parents have got that. And not only that, it's something they can share. And when you look at what you've done, Chris, with the macro, and Lee with the nature photography you're doing, you're catching a moment in time in an animal's life. If you're bringing, I've never seen some of those animals that you've shown because they're not native to where I've been. They're not native to Cyprus. They're not native to the UK. You know, I'm seeing things on there. There's a responsibility that you're taking by distributing those photographs to enlighten people, to educate people. And I think for me, being in that circle of people who do that, and I'm not just on about us, you know, the ones who've been on this, I'm on about the people who are watching this online. There's people I know personally who are watching this online, who are part of that community, who are sharing what they do with everybody else. And I think from the storytelling and from that that recording part, I think that is an amazing thing where you can have fun, as Lee's just said, but still do something monumental. So if anything comes from photography for me, that's it. And the thing is that even the most basic photographer who picked the camera up 5 minutes ago could take a perfect shot which captures a memory, captures an event, and freezes it in time for either themselves or for future generations to see, or for other people to enjoy now. I think that's an amazing thing. One little piece of metal and plastic and glass can do that on all those different levels.
Wow. Wow. Really getting us to think there.
Sorry.
Man, you guys are so awesome and brought so much of your experience and knowledge to the viewers here today, and I really appreciate it. And that's why I like to do this. You guys have really shown, I think, what a great community the Micro Four Thirds community is, that we can all come together like this from different genres and share our passion in photography, whether like what Brian just said about capturing stories, and really probably the most important thing in photography is capturing those moments that will never come again, and having that, whether it's our youth or something that happens. And with Lee, saying we need to go out and have fun. What's the point of doing all of this work and spending all of this money if we're not having fun doing it, and Chris, the curiosity and discovering that macro world and things that, like I said, it's like being on a different planet, and learning about the world that we live in, not just what we can see, but the things we can't see. And, it's just amazing. I'm always amazed and always honored and flattered that you guys can come onto the channel and be with us together, be with our viewers as a community, and giving us those different perspectives. So I want to thank the viewers for joining us today. Of course, first, none of us would be here if it wasn't for you out there learning, looking to learn about photography. And you guys are an awesome community as well. It's the reason that we're all still doing this, if we're in any kind of, social media sense. And I want to thank each of you, Lee, Brian, Chris, for joining us today and taking valuable time out of your weekend to share your knowledge and experience. So with that said, check out the description below for their profiles. I should have more links down there after the stream to any kind of workshops or mentoring or different ways to contact or see their work. I have some simple ones down there now that you could probably, branch off of. But in any case, it's been great having you guys, and I hope to see you guys again next year, if not sooner, for another meetup, because it's just amazing. And so with that said, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks everyone for watching, and hope to see everyone again soon.
Thanks
Rob. Super job.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.